Chapter 566. Sita Luyun said. Her heart was filled with doubts. This guy wants so many points. Could it be that he wants to exchange for some treasure? 83,000 points, he muttered. His eyes narrowed slightly. He then continued to ask Sita Luyun, I wonder if the sect has the profound soaring dragon pill. What do you want the profound soaring dragon pill for? Sita Luyun was slightly stunned. The profound soaring dragon pill was a low-tier yellow-grade elixir. Moreover, the mysterious Yuan soaring dragon pill was not an ordinary pill. It was a healing pill that was extremely difficult to refine, and its effects were astonishing. It was rumored that as long as one had a single breath left, the mysterious Yuan soaring dragon pill could be saved. Its price was much higher than the same level of Huang-grade initial-tier medicinal pills. To be honest, I have a close relative who was severely injured by an expert. I need a profound soaring dragon pill. Su Yi's eyes narrowed. Although he had the blood jade spirit ginseng that had successfully passed the cardinal tribulation to help his grandfather heal, Su Yi wasn't too relieved. His grandfather's injuries couldn't be allowed to have any accidents. If he had a profound soaring dragon pill, he would be more confident. Su Yi knew a little about the profound soaring dragon pill. It was a low-tier yellow-grade elixir for healing injuries. However, a low-tier yellow-grade elixir would be priceless. Therefore, Su Yi planned to exchange everything he had for points. Finally, he would exchange for a profound soaring dragon pill. How is your close relative now? What's the cultivation level of the person who attacked him? Sita Luyun asked. No wonder this kid wanted to exchange everything for points. My close relative might not be able to hold on for more than a few years. The person who attacked him is at least at the later stage of the Origin Void realm. He might even have stepped into the Origin Emperor realm. Su Yi's eyes glowed red as he clenched his fists. If it wasn't for him, his grandfather wouldn't have been injured by Wang Xuanda. In the end, his grandfather couldn't heal himself, and his injuries worsened. If anything happened to his grandfather, how could he forgive himself? Is that so? Sita Luyun's expression didn't reveal anything. She had asked what cultivation level the one who had attacked her had. She wanted to understand the cultivation level of Su Yi's relative and also understand this fellow in front of her. You exchanged everything you have just to exchange for a profound soaring dragon pellet? Tu Luyun stared fixedly at Su. Since you know about the profound origin soaring dragon pill, you should know that its price is extraordinary. If these points aren't enough, I still have quite a few spirit medicines and medicinal pills that I can exchange for them. If they aren't enough, I'll think of something else. Su Yi's eyes were filled with joy and determination. It seemed that the Shunjian Gate really did have the Xian Yuan soaring dragon elixir. If he could exchange for it, then his grandfather's injuries would be greatly improved. Su Yi did not hesitate. He could take out the spiritual herbs and pills in the mysterious space to exchange, as long as he could obtain the profound essence soaring dragon pill. It's a pity. The Shunjian Gate used to have the profound Yuan soaring dragon pill. However, there is no profound Yuan soaring dragon pill to exchange for now. Sita Luyun said. What? How could this be? Su Yi's heart trembled violently. It was as if he had suddenly fallen from a high place. The Shunjian Gate did not have the profound Yuan soaring dragon pill to exchange for. The profound Yuan soaring dragon pill is a healing pill. It's extremely difficult to refine. There was still one a few days ago. However, do you know who exchanged for it? Sita Luyun asked Su Yi. Su Yi shook his head. There was still one a few days ago. How could it be so unlucky? The last profound Yuan soaring dragon pill was exchanged by Elder by 3 days ago. It was given to Yun Lingfeng, whom you defeated to heal his injuries. Sita Luyun looked at Su Yi and said, Brat, don't you know how heavy your attack on Yun Lingfeng was? Yun Lingfeng. Su Yi's gaze trembled. The last profound Yuan soaring dragon pill had actually been exchanged for by Elder by Mingshan and given to Yun Lingfeng. If he had known earlier, he definitely would not have injured Yun Lingfeng. Although the Xinjiang Gate did not exchange for the profound Yuan soaring dragon pill, at least not in a short period of time, With the Xinjiang Gate's resources, refining one profound yuan soaring dragon pill isn't too big of a problem. Sita Luoyun looked at Su Yi and said. Hearing Situ Luoyun's words, Su Yi felt as if he had seen the sun in the darkness. However, exchanging for the profound yuan soaring dragon pill requires at least 11,000 points. Even if you can exchange for it now, you currently only have 83,000 points. You're still lacking 27,000 points. Sita Luoyun looked at Su Yi and continued. Disciple still has a lot of spirit herbs and pills that can be taken out to exchange. If it's not enough, Disciple will think of another way. As long as I can obtain the profound yuan soaring dragon pill as soon as possible, it will be fine. Su Yi once again saw hope and didn't want to miss it. Do you think that you can refine a low-tier yellow rank pill just because you want to? Moreover, it's the profound yuan soaring dragon pill. Let's not talk about how difficult it is to find the ingredients to refine the profound yuan soaring dragon pill. You also know the temper of those alchemists. If they're in a bad mood, begging them won't work. Sita Luoyun looked at Su Yi and said helplessly, the Xinjiang Gate does have some alchemists, but you don't have enough alchemists to refine low-tier yellow rank pills. Those alchemists might not necessarily give me face. Su Yi was a bit speechless. He believed in Sita Luoyun on this point. Any alchemist in this world had a transcendent status and would be treated as an honored guest by various large factions. Those alchemists that could refine yellow rank pills were all extremely powerful. Although Sita Luoyun was the sect master of the Xinjiang Gate, she might not be given too much face. There's an alchemist in the sect. He has a disciple that he dotes on greatly. This time, he also entered the myriad sword battlefield, but unfortunately, he did not enter the final battle. If you're willing to give the supreme opportunity you obtained from winning the championship to his disciple in exchange for a profound yuan soaring dragon pill, I believe that alchemist will definitely be very willing. Sita Luoyun stared at Su Yi seriously and asked, but are you willing to answer me after you have thought it through? I am willing. Without much hesitation, Su Yi nodded. Although the supreme opportunity of the Xinjiang Gate was tempting, compared to giving his grandfather a chance to recover, Su Yi would not hesitate to choose the latter. He possessed the primordial chaos supreme technique and the heavenly fey ancient scripture. Even if he lacked this unknown supreme opportunity, he could still advance. Even without the supreme benefit of the Xinjiang Gate, Su Yi was confident that he would one day become an expert. His foundation and reliance had always been the primordial chaos supreme technique. But if he lacked the profound yuan soaring dragon pill and caused his grandfather to suffer an accident, Su Yi knew that he would never be able to forgive himself. He could search for more opportunities and benefits in the future, but he only had one grandfather. Ever since he was young, only his grandfather had doted on him. He was his closest kin and was more important than anything else. Hearing Su Yi's words, Sita Luoyun looked at Su Yi with a deep light in her eyes, as if she wanted to see through Su Yi. After a long while, Sita Luoyun opened her mouth and said to Su Yi, "Kid, you have really surprised me." As her voice faded, Sita Luoyun reached into her chest, and a spatial bag appeared in her hand. With a flash of light, she threw a small medicine box to Su Yi and said, "Take it." Su Yi was surprised. He received the medicine box and carefully opened it with some doubt. Walala, when the medicine box was opened, a dazzling light burst out from the gap. A rich medicinal fragrance assailed his nostrils. Accompanied by a huge energy impact, it burst open the gap. Inside the medicine box, there was a thumb-sized pill that was suffused with a green brilliance. The light was so dazzling that Su Yi could not look at it directly. There was a faint dragon's roar echoing. The astonishing energy made Su Yi's heart tremble. Su Yi was shocked. Under the energy fluctuation, it seemed that the pill was about to leave the medicine box. He immediately closed the medicine box. This pill was definitely a treasure. This is the profound, soaring dragon pill that you wanted. Sita Luoyun's voice landed in Su Yi's ears. Didn't you say that there was no more profound, soaring dragon pill? Su Yi's eyes trembled. This was actually the profound, soaring dragon pill. It was priceless and was currently in his hands. There's no more Shunjian Gate, but this is my private possession. It can be considered a coincidence. Keep it. There is no need for you to exchange for the supreme benefits. Sita Luyan said to Su indifferently. Sect Master, this, Su, he was rather surprised and even more excited. With this profound essence soaring dragon elixir, his grandfather's recovery from his injuries would be even more assured. Sita Luyan stared at Su Yi and said, Don't be happy too early. Although there is no need for you to exchange for the supreme benefits, the mysterious spiritual fruit and all of your points will be automatically deducted. Later, send the mysterious spiritual fruit to the hidden sword peak. As for the remaining points, you can slowly return them to me in the future. Thank you, Sect Master. Su Yi did not stand on ceremony and kept the profound soaring dragon pill. There was no way for him to stand on ceremony. He urgently needed this profound soaring dragon pill. No need to thank me. Do you know about the Sacred Martial Assembly? Situ Luyun asked. I just found out a little. Su Yi's eyes moved. He had just found out a little about the Sacred Martial Assembly from Situ Muyang not long ago. There are still 3 months to the Sacred Martial Assembly. This time, the outstanding young disciples of the Myriad Sword Assembly will all participate. At that time, if you don't enter the top 10, no, if you don't enter the top 5, you will pay me back double the amount of this profound soaring dragon pill. Situ Luyan stared at Su Yi and said, I have to participate in the Sacred Martial Assembly. Su Yi's heart suddenly trembled. The people of the Sacred Martial Assembly would also participate in the Sacred Martial Assembly. If he went, the fact that he was still alive would immediately be exposed. At that time, he would have no choice but to face the people of the Sacred Martial Assembly. Of course you have to participate. 5 days later, someone will pick you up. Whether or not you can obtain the supreme benefits will depend on your own luck. Sita Luyan looked at Su Yi and waved his hand, saying, Go back and prepare. Remember to send the mysterious spiritual fruit to the hidden sword peak. Chapter 567. Looking at Su Yi's back, Sita Luyan's eyes flickered. This brat is indeed not ordinary. A silhouette walked out of the study room. It was the right protector. What do you think? Sita Luyan smiled. True and false, true and false. He is cunning and treacherous, but he is loyal to his friends. To be honest, I have never met such a person in my life. I cannot see through him. The right protector smiled. He has 4 elements, but he was able to reach the 7th floor of the Tower of Ascension. I have never seen such a person before. Sita Luyan said, It seems like you have made a decision. The right protector looked at Sita Luyan and said, Let's go there together in 5 days. At that time, those people will have nothing to say. What they want is merely an opportunity. If that brat truly has such good fortune and is able to obtain such supreme benefits, it would be the will of the heavens. Sita Luyan said. The right protector's eyes flickered. Then he raised his eyes and said, Does the leader believe in that brat? Even though he is cunning and treacherous, he is loyal to his friends. I am afraid that one day, the Shunjian Gate will be a small pond to him. He is not a fish in a pond. Sita Luyan stood in front of the table and looked at the word sword that he had written. But the leader still wants that brat to go there. If that brat really obtains that supreme benefit, then... The right protector's eyes flickered. That was the supreme benefit of the Shunjian Gate. If it fell into the hands of someone who could not be controlled by the Shunjian Gate, it would not be a good thing for the Shunjian Gate. Whether or not he can obtain it depends on his luck. After all, it has been so many years and no one has succeeded. Maybe this time, he will return without any success. Sita Luyan raised his eyes. Light flickered in his eyes, and he said, Even if that brat really has that kind of luck, I am willing to take a gamble. The movements, they're getting bigger and bigger. Maybe this time, it will really fall into someone's hands. Right Protector said. His eyes flickered with radiance, and for some reason, his heart trembled. He understood clearly what this represented. The disciples of this generation are extraordinary. If those supreme benefits appear and can complement each other, my Shunjian Gate might really have a chance to prosper. Sita Luyan clenched his fists slightly and light surged in his eyes. Su-yi returned to the 36 Sword Peak with joy and excitement in his heart. He had already obtained the profound, soaring dragon elixir and the blood jade spirit ginseng that had successfully passed the tribulation. His grandfather's injuries were more likely to be healed. In the courtyard, after making sure that no one was around, Su-yi summoned the mysterious space. The blood jade spirit ginseng was still recuperating in the mysterious space. The spiritual herbs and medicinal herbs in the mysterious space were very lush. After plucking the 34 mystical spiritual fruits, Su-yi immediately exited the mysterious space. He wanted to head to the Hidden Sword Peak as quickly as possible. Su-yi did not have so many special items on him to store so many mystical spiritual fruits. He could only deliver them to the Xinjiang Gate at the Hidden Sword Peak as quickly as possible. Otherwise, the efficacy of the mystical spiritual fruits would be reduced. The Gale Golden Eagle had been on the 36th Sword Peak. Su-yi found Tan Chao and asked about the location of the Hidden Sword Peak. After that, he summoned the Gale Golden Eagle and headed there directly. The Hidden Sword Peak had always been the place where the Xinjiang Gate collected martial techniques, sword techniques, and treasured swords. Only disciples who met the requirements could set foot there. Su-yi was going to the Hidden Sword Peak to deliver the mystical spiritual fruits, so he naturally had the qualifications. On the back of the Gale Golden Eagle, Su-yi saw a large number of ancient buildings from afar. There were many pavilions and people coming and going. In a small square, there were many savage beasts lying on the ground. One after another, disciples of the Xinjiang Gate landed on their beast mounts. Su-yi landed on the back of the Gale Golden Eagle. The surrounding disciples looked at him and were secretly moved. It's Su-yi. Is he here to look for martial techniques? Some disciples were discussing with shock in their eyes. The battle on the spiritual sword peak 3 days ago still left them with a lingering fear. Martial Uncle Su-yi, please follow me. A protector is already waiting for you. A young woman in her late 20s came to Su-yi's side. She was dressed in a tight robe and looked valiant. Her face was delicate and pretty. You are? Su-yi was surprised. He did not seem to know this woman. According to seniority, I should call you Martial Uncle. A protector told me that Martial Uncle is coming and asked me to wait here to bring Martial Uncle over. The woman with the surname Qin smiled faintly as she sized Su-yi up in a generous manner. Su-yi's name had already spread throughout the Xinjiang Gate. She was also present at the Myriad Sword Conference 3 days ago. She knew that this young man in front of her was actually a terrifying master. If you don't dare, then I'll have to trouble you. Su-yi nodded helplessly. He did not expect Elder Su's seniority in the Xinjiang Gate to be so high. It seemed that sect leader Situ Luyan had already made arrangements to inform the Hidden Sword Peak that he was coming. It was related to the 34 mystical spiritual fruits, so he arranged for disciples to wait here for him. You're welcome. The woman with the surname Qin was not arrogant. She immediately brought Su-yi to a huge ancient building. In the side hall, a protector was already waiting. What surprised Su-yi was that this protector was not unfamiliar. It was Zhongqing's master, Protector Ho Changming. Greetings, Protector Ho. Su-yi bowed. He had always had a good impression of Protector Ho. I can't accept such a bow. Did you bring the mystical spiritual fruits? Protector Ho Changming smiled bitterly. Su-yi's seniority was too high. How could he accept such a bow? Su-yi was also very helpless. He could not directly announce that he had not become Elder Su's disciple. He then took out a space bag and handed it to Protector Ho Changming. All the mystical spiritual fruits were inside. Protector Ho Changming had already received news that Su-yi was coming to deliver the 34 mystical spiritual fruits. He had been looking forward to it. After receiving the space bag from Su-yi, Protector Ho Changming immediately peeked inside. A mystical spiritual fruit appeared in his hand. Looking at the sparkling and translucent mystical spiritual fruit, Protector Ho Changming's expression changed. He could not help but whisper in shock. Unbelievable, truly unbelievable. The woman with the surname Qin also could not help but look at the mystical spiritual fruit. She did not have the strength or opportunity to obtain such a treasure 5 years ago. There's nothing else. I will arrange the rest. There are many martial skills, cultivation methods, and hidden swords on the Hidden Sword Peak. You can take a look around. If you're not familiar with them, you can ask Qingjun to show you around. Protector Ho Chaming waved his hand. His gaze was fixed on the mystical spiritual fruit in his hand. Chapter 568. Su Yi nodded and turned to leave. Since the mystical spiritual fruit had been delivered, what happened next had nothing to do with him. Senior Granduncle, do you need me to bring you around and familiarize you with the Hidden Sword Peak? The Qin lady recovered her senses and followed behind Su Yi. That's what I was thinking. I'll have to trouble you then. Su Yi nodded. He wanted to familiarize himself with the Hidden Sword Peak so that he could be more familiar with it in the future. Under the Qin lady's guidance, Su Yi became more familiar with the Hidden Sword Peak. The entire Hidden Sword Peak was divided into several areas, of which the three most important areas were martial techniques, medicinal herbs and elixirs, as well as various weapons with swords as the main weapon. If one wanted to obtain these, they would have to exchange points for them. The higher the level of the elixir, martial technique, or sword, the higher the amount of points required. Su Yi could only look around. All his points had already been exchanged for the profound soaring dragon elixir, and he was still lacking quite a bit of points. His badge was still the basic 5 points, and even if he took a fancy to something, he did not have any points to exchange for it. Latest chapter, S. Upper, and I after a leisurely stroll. It was already dusk when Su Yi left the Hidden Sword Peak. The sun set in the west, and the glow of the sunset covered the mountain peaks. As the last of the sunset disappeared into the western horizon, Su Yi returned to the 36th Sword Peak. Cultivators did not need to sleep. When one reached the essence spirit realm, 2 hours of breathing and recuperating was equivalent to dozens of hours of sleep. There were still 5 days before he could obtain the legendary benefits of the Xinjiang Gate. Although Su Yi was somewhat looking forward to it, Su Yi did not want to waste these 5 days. He planned to completely recover from his injuries and continue practicing the basics of the sword. 36th Sword Peak, Back Mountain. The sky was hazy and the moonlight was scattered. Tonight, the moon was bright and the stars were dim. A few stars were faintly discernible in the horizon. Grandfather, I will return as soon as possible. Your injuries will definitely be healed. Su Yi looked at the bright moon in the horizon. His eyes seemed to sparkle as they gently blinked. I wonder where my parents in this world are right now. Perhaps it was a night like this that caused one's thoughts to fluctuate. At this moment, Su Yi's heart, which was usually hidden, was stirred. His grandfather's injury, and strictly speaking, his father and mother, who were only a distant memory, were all floating in the depths of Su Yi's heart. Impatience, sadness, and longing were all rippling, touching the softest part of Su Yi's heart. Let's continue practicing. After a long time, Su Yi's eyes twitched slightly as he collected all his thoughts. Strength was still the most important thing. He had to become a true expert as soon as possible. Swish, swish, Su Yi continued to practice the basics of the sword. Although it was simple and boring, Su Yi knew very well that what he lacked was precisely this kind of simple and boring basics, which would be of great benefit to him. Time slowly passed. Su Yi had been staying at the back of the mountain for the past few days. When he was exhausted, he would breathe and adjust his breathing for a while before continuing to practice. In the end, Su Yi used the broken sword on his back to practice. The heavy sword, which weighed more than 1,000 pounds, was even more strenuous. Su Yi had been persevering. This was also a kind of training. Time was like quicksand in one's hand, quietly passing by. In Xinjiang Gate, the shock caused by the Myriad Sword Conference had finally calmed down a little. In the quiet room, there was an energy fluctuation, and a mighty aura slowly rippled. On the bed, Yin Lingfeng sat cross-legged, his face slightly pale. Phew! Exhaling a long breath from his stomach, Yin Lingfeng's tightly shut eyes opened. There was a flicker in his eyes, and the aura on his body trembled violently, shaking the room. As expected of the profound soaring dragon pill, the effect is really not bad. In the room, Elder by Mingshan's eyes lit up as he looked at his disciple with joy in his eyes. Seeing that his disciple was fine and even had a slight improvement in his aura, Elder by Mingshan's tensed heart completely relaxed. Although he had paid a great price to obtain the profound soaring dragon pill, it was definitely worth it. "I've disappointed you, Master," Yin Lingfeng said, his face twitching. Until now, Yin Lingfeng was still unwilling to believe that he had lost so miserably. Originally, he thought that after revealing his identity as a soul controller, coupled with his extraordinary soul power, he would be able to soar to the sky. Becoming the champion of the Myriad Sword Conference and obtaining the supreme benefits was just the beginning. From then on, even in the entire middle ground, he would be able to lead the heroes of his generation. However, Yin Lingfeng had never thought that he would lose so miserably in the end. "It's not your fault. That kid is just too unbelievable." Elder Bai Mingshan's expression was indifferent, and his eyes were cold. Then, light flickered in his eyes as he said to Yin Lingfeng, "But this defeat is not the end. On the contrary, this is still our chance. Although that kid has become the champion, the final benefits may not fall on him." "Master, you're saying that we still have a chance to obtain the supreme benefits?" Hearing this, Yin Lingfeng's eyes lit up as he stared at Bai Mingshan. "Of course, that kid's background is unknown, and he wants to obtain the supreme benefits from the Xinjiang Gate. Even with Suruga's protection, he will not get what he wants. I've already found a few elders to oppose it, and, in the end, the Gate Master had to agree. This time, it will not be one person going in, but 18, Elder Bai Mingshan said with a cold look in his eyes. 18. Yin Lingfeng's eyes flickered as he said, 18 people. I wonder who will have the opportunity to obtain the supreme benefits? Indeed, 18 people. Who can obtain the supreme benefits will depend on their own luck, Elder Bai Mingshan said with a cold smile. Bai Mingshan spoke while a wisp of a cold smile flashed on the corners of his mouth. He said, however, it isn't impossible. With that, a small jade bottle appeared in Elder Bai Mingshan's hand, and he placed it in Yin Lingfeng's hand. Master, what's this? Yin Lingfeng was surprised and wanted to open the jade bottle. Don't open it. There's a drop of blood catalyst inside. Once you're inside, use this blood catalyst as a catalyst, and you'll have at least a 90% chance of obtaining the supreme benefits. Elder Bai Mingshan sneered. Master, where did this come from? Is it really useful? Yin Lingfeng was pleasantly surprised. A 90% chance of obtaining the supreme benefits meant that victory was already in his hands. There's no need to ask. Anyway, this is your last chance. As long as you can obtain the supreme benefits, everything will still be yours. Elder Bai Mingshan said in a deep voice. Thank you, Master. Yin Lingfeng bowed emotionally. He was extremely happy, and a cold look surged in his eyes. As long as he obtained the supreme benefits, he would be able to regain everything he had lost. He would be able to return the humiliation that Su Yi had given him tenfold. Chapter 569. 5 days passed very quickly. In these 5 days, Su Yi stayed at the back of the 36th Sword Peak, using the broken sword to practice the basics of sword. In these 5 days, Su Yi's injuries were completely healed. Early in the morning, the mountains had just woken up. The morning clouds came out of the mountains, and the morning glow poured down on the mountains. Huff! Su Yi stopped his breathing and retracted his hand seals. He spat out a mouthful of turbid qi from his dantian, and the qi on his body shook. The surrounding sand and stones were swept up, and his robes fluttered. His tightly shut eyes opened, and a scarlet light flashed like lightning. It disappeared in a flash, and then returned to its tenacity and depth. Su Yi looked at the morning sun, his eyes filled with anticipation, and muttered, It should be today. A moment later, on the 36th Sword Peak, a brute demon beast mount descended. Only Situ Muyang dared to ride a brute demon beast mount directly. Boss Su Yi, we should set off. Situ Muyang's eyes were filled with anticipation, and he was extremely excited. Su Yi's feet moved, and he jumped onto the brute demon beast mount and asked, Where are we going now? to the Divine Sword Valley. The supreme benefits are there. Sita Muyang told Su-yi. After that, from Situ Muyang's mouth, Su-yi finally understood what the so-called supreme benefits of the Xinjiang Gate were. Xinjiang Gate has been standing in the central region for a long time. It is said that our Xinjiang Gate's ancestor relied on one man and one sword to dominate the continent, and finally created the Xinjiang Gate. After that, the ancestor disappeared, and I'm afraid that he had already passed away. However, his treasured sword had always been in the Divine Sword Valley, and he had left behind the sect rules. All the experts above the elder level, when they died of old age, had to go to the Divine Sword Valley to pass away. Thus, the experts of the Xinjiang Gate would all die in the Divine Sword Valley. Su-yi only knew about all this from Sita Muyang. The Divine Sword Valley buried all the experts and treasured swords of the Xinjiang Gate. It was also a restricted area in Xinjiang Gate. Every once in a while, the Divine Sword Valley would open. This time, it just so happened to be right after the Myriad Sword Conference. It was said that every time the Divine Sword Valley opened, the Xinjiang Gate would arrange for a disciple to enter to see if he could obtain the treasured sword left behind by the Xinjiang Gate's ancestor. It was rumored that the Patriarch of Xinjiang Gate had left all his inheritance in the sword. Whoever could get the sword would not only get a divine sword, but also the inheritance of the Patriarch of Xinjiang Gate. That was a great benefit. It turns out that the supreme benefit is everything left behind by the Patriarch of Xinjiang Gate. Su-yi's heart was secretly moved. It was not hard to imagine how powerful the ancestor of the Divine Sword sect, who had established it until now, was. If he could obtain his inheritance, he would be able to dominate the entire continent in the future. All these years, every time the Xinjiang Gate sent people into the Divine Sword Valley, they wanted to obtain the inheritance left behind by the Patriarch, but no one succeeded. At most, they could only obtain some of the inheritance left behind by the other experts of the Xinjiang Gate. Situ Muyang continued. He knew a lot of things. Could it be that there's something special about the Divine Sword Valley? Su-yi was suspicious. There were a lot of experts in the Xinjiang Gate. How could no one obtain the inheritance left behind by the Xinjiang Gate's ancestor? This was not normal. Situ Muyang looked at Su-yi and smiled, then said with shock in his eyes, Divine Sword Valley is very mysterious, because once you enter, you will not be able to come out and will devour everything. It is a dangerous place, and only those experts who have exhausted their oil lamps will enter. And only every time there is a commotion in the Divine Sword Valley will people be allowed to enter. In this short period of time, the Divine Sword Valley is rather safe, but this kind of safety is only for cultivators below the Yuanjin stage. The higher the cultivation, the more dangerous it will be to enter. Is it that strange? Su-yi raised his eyebrows. No wonder the experts of the Xinjiang Gate did not obtain this supreme benefit after so long. It turned out that the Divine Sword Valley was truly strange. In short, the Divine Sword Valley was not something that could be entered just because one wanted to. It needed to be at a specific time to be relatively safe. Furthermore, this kind of safety was only for cultivators below the Yuanjin stage. The higher the cultivation level of the ranker, the greater the danger. Every time the Divine Sword Valley opens, only one disciple will be arranged to enter. But this time, it is said that the commotion in the Divine Sword Valley is quite big. So this time, 18 disciples will be arranged to enter the Divine Sword Valley. Whoever gets the supreme benefit in the end will depend on their own luck and fortune, or, as usual, no one will be able to obtain it. K update. Latest _Y update on CA. Dr. Muyang said, his eyes filled with anticipation and excitement, but he was also very clear that he might not be able to obtain it and would need to rely on his own luck and fortune. 18. F***CK. Hearing that, Su-yi's eyes twitched. Didn't they say that only the champion of the Myriad Sword Conference would get the supreme benefit? So that supreme benefit might not be obtained. Most importantly, the opportunity that originally belonged to him seemed to have suddenly increased to 18 people. I've been tricked, old fox, secretly curling his lips, Su-yi was sure that he had been tricked by sect leader Sita Luyan. I'm afraid that the old fox has already arranged for 18 people to enter the Divine Sword Valley, but he still cheated me of so many mystical spirit fruits. But thinking about the profound essence soaring dragon pill on him, Su-yi felt helpless. We're here. On the back of the flying barbaric demon beast, Situ Muyang spoke. Su-yi followed his gaze, and a vast valley appeared below. The surrounding mountains were empty and silent. The morning sun hung in the sky, and the spots of light were like chess pieces. The silent valley was originally cold and desolate, as if it was deserted. At this moment, there were many barbaric demon beast mounts and figures below. Appearing above the valley, Su-yi felt a mysterious aura spreading over, causing his heart to tremble for no reason. Following that, the aura disappeared without a trace, as if it had never appeared. Below, many figures raised their eyes, their gazes like lightning, shooting over. Su-yi saw many familiar figures: Muyao, Sakura, Asaka, Gongqi, Yunling Feng, Ryugan River, Oluo, Gu Chunyu, Nanli Ran, Jiang Shiwen, Qin Fong, Zhongling Yun, Ouyang Ran, Xia Changqing, Yushanha, and the others. Su-yi and Situ Muyang dismounted from their flying barbaric demon beast mounts and swept their gazes across. There were also sect leader Situ Luyun by Mingshan, Elder Yu Changqing, and a few other elders. There were also two other figures that surprised Su-yi. The Black Robe Sword 11 was also among them. There was also a young man in a brocade robe who had an extraordinary temperament and was about the same age, causing Su-yi to pay more attention to him. That guy is called Si Shiyuan. It is said that his ranking in the Sword Pagoda is not low, and he is also an alchemist. However, when he came out of the Myriad Sword battlefield, he did not have enough sword grainstones, haha. Sita Muyang felt Su-yi's gaze and immediately whispered to Su-yi and could not help but laugh. Chapter 570. Alchemist. Hearing this, Su-yi couldn't help but take a few more glances at Si Xuan. He had heard from sect master Sita Luyun that a disciple of an elder who was an alchemist had been eliminated early in the Myriad Sword battlefield because of a lack of sword vein stones. He reckoned that it might be Si Shiyuan. Whoosh whoosh, as Su-yi and Situ Muyang dismounted from their barbarian beast mounts. The surrounding gazes shot over with shock. Some nodded their heads in acknowledgement, while others had ripples in their eyes. Gongqi looked at Su-yi, rolled her eyes, and pouted her red lips. Muyao also glanced at Su-yi. On the other hand, Ryugan River, Oluo, Gu Chunyu, Ouyang Ran, and the others looked at Su-yi and nodded their heads in acknowledgement. Only one gloomy and cold gaze looked over. Su-yi followed the gaze and saw that it belonged to Yun Lingfeng. After a few days, although Yun Lingfeng's face was still rather pale, he didn't seem to be in too much danger. This caused Su-yi to be secretly shocked. It seemed that the profound, soaring dragon pill was indeed a treasure. Yun Lingfeng's serious injuries had actually recovered to such an extent in just 7 or 8 days. Greetings, sect master, greetings, elders. Too lazy to pay attention to Yun Lingfeng, Su-yi stepped forward and bowed to Sita Luyun, Yu Changqing, and the other elders. As for Elder by Mingshan, Su-yi also pretended not to pay much attention to him. Looking at Su-yi, Elder Yu Changqing and the others nodded their heads with a smile. They didn't act arrogantly, but there was a hint of regret in their eyes that they didn't take in such a disciple. Is everyone here? Then let's get ready, Situ Luyun said. Boom. Before Situ Luyun finished speaking, the valley in front of them suddenly trembled. The void rumbled as light shot out of nowhere and soared into the sky. The strange thing was that the void above the valley suddenly began to darken. Everything only lasted for an instant before everything calmed down again. What a terrifying aura. However, it was at this moment that an invisible and terrifying aura filled the air, causing the hearts of the younger generation disciples to tremble for no reason. Even their souls were trembling. The elders and sect leaders Situ Luyun focused their gazes and stared at the valley. They frowned slightly. After that, Situyun's expression congealed a little. His gaze swept across the group of disciples in front of the valley and said, "In a while, the elders will work together to open the Divine Sword Valley. In the past, the exit that was opened could only allow one person to enter, but this time, there are some changes in the Divine Sword Valley. I reckon that all of you will be able to enter. However, you must be careful. You only have 24 hours. After 24 hours, you must return to the exit via the original route. Once the exit was completely closed, he would be buried inside. Inside the Divine Sword Valley, whether or not you can reap any benefits will depend on your own fortune. Although these 24 hours are safe, it is only relative. Everything in the Divine Sword Valley is very mysterious, and there are many unknown dangers. You must be careful. Do you understand?" "Understood." All the disciples nodded their heads in response, their eyes filled with anticipation and excitement. This time, everyone had the chance to obtain the supreme benefits. Everyone knew that once they obtained the inheritance left behind by the patriarch of the Xinjiang Gate, they would truly soar into the heavens. The elders swept their gazes across, looked at each other, and gestured with their gazes. Swish, swish, a total of 5 elders immediately soared into the sky. 5 silhouettes soared into the air from 5 different directions. They stood in midair and radiated with the radiance of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth respectively. 5 vigorous and vast auras pervaded the air. The 5 elders condensed their hand seals. Their auras surged. The light was as dazzling as the stars falling. The astonishing aura surge, causing the entire valley space to freeze, causing all the disciples' hearts to palpitate, as though there was a huge rock pressing down on their chests, making it difficult for them to breathe. Chi, 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 chi. In the hands of the 5 elders, the 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth fluctuated. Each of them shot out an energy pillar and landed in 5 different directions of the valley. Boom! When the 5 elemental energy pillars in the hands of the 5 elders landed, the entire valley seemed to have come to life. The sky was dark for no reason, but the surroundings of the valley were emitting a dazzling light. The mysterious aura was vast, and the earth shook. This kind of aura caused one's heart to palpitate. It was as though a demon god had appeared in the Divine Sword Valley. It shook one's soul. Su-yi raised his eyebrows, and once again felt the mysterious and terrifying aura. This feeling did not come from Su-yi's sharp soul force, as though the terrifying and mysterious aura could not be sensed by the soul force. Instead, it was the primeval supreme technique on Su-yi's body that sensed it, but the aura disappeared in a flash. Chi. When the light rays shot out from the surroundings of the valley, Situ-Liyun waved his sleeves and leaped into the air above the valley. As the hand seals condensed, Situ-Liyun's body shone brightly. In the end, there was an energy light that shot out and appeared in the valley. Rumble. When the light rays shot out, the valley's void rumbled. A void door tore through space and revealed itself. The light rays were dazzling, and the aura was vast. The space door was filled with an ancient aura, and it emitted a sonorous sound. The exit has already been opened. It will last for at most 24 hours. Quickly enter, and remember to return on time. Otherwise, the consequences will be unimaginable. Situ-Liyun's voice sounded in everyone's ears. Whoosh, whoosh. As Situ-Liyun's voice fell, the figures in front of the valley were already prepared. They immediately flew out and entered the open space door. "Let's go. Don't let anyone beat us to it," Situ-Miyang said to Su-yi. The energy under his feet moved, and he followed behind. Su-yi did not hesitate and followed closely behind. However, he secretly circulated the energy in his body. After feeling the mysterious and terrifying aura, Su-yi reckoned that the Divine Sword Valley was not a good place. He had to be careful. Inside the space door, the light rays were dazzling, and it was filled with a vast and ancient aura. The space around the door rippled. In a flash, one figure after another walked out. A door separated them, but it was as if they were 2 different worlds. One figure after another walked out and looked at everything that appeared in front of them. They were all secretly surprised. The entire space was dark. The ground was dry, and the mountains were connected. Not a single blade of grass grew. There was a deathly stillness everywhere. Above his head, it was vast and dusky, as if a dark sky had enveloped him. The entire space was indescribably strange. There was not even a single sound coming out. It was so quiet that one could hear their own heartbeat. Part 2 of the new chapter / It was as if time had lost its meaning in this place. The 18 young figures landed on the ground. The first thing they did was to size up their surroundings. Chapter 571. Suyi's gaze was solemn. In a mountain range in front of him, there was a huge mountain in the distance that was particularly eye-catching, grand, and majestic. That mountain peak was like dozens of mountain peaks combined together, appearing exceptionally grand and majestic. From the top of that mountain peak, there was a faint, mysterious aura that pervaded the air. Even though it was a distance away, it still made Su-yi feel uneasy. This aura was exactly the same as the terrifying aura that Su-yi had felt twice outside. Swoosh, swoosh, very quickly, Yin Lingfeng, Jiang Xuan, Qin Fong, and many other disciples shot out Yuan Qi from the soles of their feet, flying forward. Mu Yao, Sakura, Asaka, and Gong Qi also left, as if they did not want to fall behind. The ancestor left it on that mountain. We have to be careful. The road is not safe. Sita Muyang said to Su-yi, "It should be much faster if we fly over." The corner of Su-yi's mouth curled into a smile. He had already cultivated the 100 steps of Fuyao to the 3rd level, and was able to condense a pair of Yuan Qi wings, which gave him a lot of advantages. If you want to fly over, I guarantee that you will regret it. Sita Muyang chuckled, looked at Su-yi, and said, "It is relatively safe here. We have to restrain our aura as much as possible, otherwise it might cause danger." "Is that so?" Su-yi frowned, looking at Muyao. When Ryugan River, Zhonglingyun, Jian, Yi, and the others left, no wonder they did not release much of their aura. It turned out that the more aura they released, the greater the danger they might encounter. The two of them formed a group, slightly releasing their Yuan Qi, and headed towards the huge mountain peak. In this space, the line of sight was dim, as if there was no sun. Even the air was filled with a black, mist-like airflow, as if there was a huge, ancient tomb buried underground, and there was a heart-palpitating aura everywhere. The mountain was connected to the stone paths, and not a single blade of grass grew. Everywhere was filled with the vicissitudes of life and deathly stillness. Su-yi was deeply moved. He did not know how many experts of Shunjian Gate had walked into this place when their oil lamps were about to run out. In the end, they were buried here. This was the burial place of many experts of Shunjian Gate. A moment later, Mu Yao, Yin Lingfeng, Ryugan River, and the others disappeared. There was more than one mountain path in a mountain range, and all of them led to the most majestic peak in front of them. Not long after, a white skeleton sat cross-legged on a huge rock. Its body was covered in a mottled robe, and the emblem of Shunjian Gate could be faintly seen on it. The skeleton had fluffy black hair that covered its face, revealing a faintly discernible skull. In front of it was a sword that was inserted into the rock upside down and was covered in dust. Sita Muyang stepped forward and bowed respectfully. He seemed to have sensed something as he said softly, "This is a senior expert of the Divine Sword sect. He passed away here when he passed away." Sui also stepped forward and bowed. He was now a disciple of Shunjian Gate, and this was the body of an ancestor of Shunjian Gate. He had passed away here, so he was in awe. Looking at the skeleton in front of him, the body of an ancestor expert of Shunjian Gate was like an ordinary bone. There was no fluctuation of aura, and it was dim. Sui looked carefully. There were even faint black spots on the skeleton, as if it had been corroded by some mysterious aura. This treasure sword is also a treasure. It's at least at the Tao artifact level. Sita Muyang said to Sui. The dusty sword in front of the ancestor expert was at least at the Tao artifact level. It was a treasure, Tao artifact. Hearing that, Su Yi's eyes lit up and immediately stared at the dusty sword. 8G, $G, $GA, treasure sword at the Tao artifact level, even if it was at the initial stage of the Tao artifact level, was equivalent to being priceless. The weapon level was Yuan weapon, Xian weapon, spirit weapon, Tao artifact, magic artifact, and saint artifact. The weapons at the spirit weapon level were already sentient and could complement their masters. As for the weapons at the Tao artifact level, it was said that they had already carried the Tao and could fuse with their masters. You could try to communicate with it, and maybe it will choose you. However, you can only take one treasure from the Divine Sword Valley. If you choose another one, you won't be able to get what the ancestor left behind. Sita Miang told Su Yi. Is that so? Su Yi immediately shook his head. Although this Tao artifact level treasure sword was a treasure, the biggest goal of entering the Divine Sword Valley was to enter the Shunjian Gate. It was no wonder that every time a disciple of the Shunjian Gate came in, there would definitely be someone who passed by this place, but did not take away this treasure sword. Buzz! Suddenly, at this moment, the dusty sword suddenly emitted a buzzing sound. The dust trembled, and a ray of light spread out. This light carried a strange black mist, and it was filled with a terrifying aura. Swish! A strange black light suddenly shot out from the deep eye sockets of the skeleton that had already passed away in a sitting posture. Previous chapter, next chapter, boom! From the fluffy black hair that covered his face, a chilling aura suddenly swept out, causing his tattered robes to flutter in the wind. Swish! Everything was as fast as lightning. The skeleton that had passed away seemed to have suddenly come to life. It waved its hand and pulled out the treasure sword in front of it. A sword light was like lightning, and directly slashed towards Su Yi and Sita Muyang. This is bad. Su Yi's face changed greatly. He activated the Fuyao 100 changing steps to the extreme, pulling Sita Muyang, who was still unable to react, and instantly retreated. Boom! Wherever the sword light passed, a long crack would appear on the ground. Gravel would surge, and sand would fly everywhere. What's going on? Sita Muyang regained his senses. His heart still had a lingering fear. If not for the fact that Su Yi had just left, the consequences of this sword strike could be imagined. Up the mountain, go quickly, just as Su Yi and Sita Muyang were preparing for battle, and their expressions changed. The skeleton suddenly opened its mouth. Its voice was hoarse, and its voice was hoarse, as if it was hoarse, and the black light in its eyes flickered with a hint of light. The skeleton held the sword tightly in one hand, and once again stabbed it into the ground, causing the surrounding ground to crumble inch by inch. It pointed at the majestic mountain peak in front of them, and said to Su Yi and Sita Muyang, "Go quickly. Let's go. Although Su Yi did not know what had happened, this strange change and the terrifying aura that spread out from the skeleton's body made Su Yi very clear that if he stayed here, he would not be a match for the skeleton. If he had not dodged that sword strike quickly, an ordinary Yuan Jin stage cultivator would not have been able to withstand it. Whoosh, whoosh, without any hesitation, the two of them quickly left, their hearts trembling. Only when the skeleton's movements had disappeared far away did Su Yi and Sita Muyang slow down. What the hell just happened? Chapter 572. I don't know. The aura is very strange. Su Yi shook his head. He did not know what had happened, but there was no doubt that he had just escaped a calamity. Boom! Suddenly, the ground trembled for no reason. Be careful. Su Yi and Sita Muyang were still in shock. They immediately stood with their backs against each other, circulating their Yuan Qi in their body, ready for battle. Qi. Cracks appeared on the ground. Two white bone palms were suffused with a black light, and on the white bones there was a strange black dot. One hand grabbed onto Su Yi's anklet, and the other grabbed onto Sita Muyang's anklet. A strange aura filled the air, and corrosive Yuan Qi protected them. Not good. Su Yi's face changed greatly. His eyes suddenly flashed with a dazzling light like lightning. His clothes fluttered, and his hair fluttered behind him. The aura on his body seemed to carry the fury of thunder. His right foot suddenly stomped, and a yuan qi vortex swept out like a storm under his foot. Boom! As his foot landed, the ground trembled, and the air roared. This was the first move of Wrath of the Eight Lands. From where Su Yi's foot landed, circles of black earth attribute yuan qi energy swept out like waves. Crack, crack. Where Su Yi's foot landed, the ground cracked, and cracks as thick as an arm spread out like a spider web. The surrounding rocks and dust were all shattered into fine powder in an instant, and the surrounding area was shaken to the point of rapidly fluctuating. The two white bone palms that were suffused with black light that stretched out from the ground were also shaken away, and the black light was dissipating. Boom! But also at this moment, on the surrounding mountains, there were many auras fluctuating, and several skeleton-like figures crawled out of nowhere. These skeletons all had disheveled hair, and the aura on their bodies was terrifying. Their eye sockets emitted a heart-palpitating black light, and they all stared at Su Yi and Sita Muyang. "This is bad, let's go." Su Yi's expression changed greatly. Yuan Qi gushed out from the soles of his feet, and he immediately fled. "What the hell is going on? I've never heard of such danger." Sita Muyang clicked his tongue. He had never heard of such a strange danger in the Divine Sword Valley. Without any delay, he followed behind Su Yi. Ka-ka! A tall skeleton crawled out from the crack in the ground beneath Su Yi and Sita Muyang's feet. Its eyes flickered with black light as it stared in the direction that Su Yi and Sita Muyang had left. It then immediately chased after them. Whoosh, whoosh. On the cliffs of the surrounding mountains, the skeletons were also climbing up the cliffs like monkeys, chasing after Su Yi and Sita Muyang. What the hell is going on? Is it a zombie? As Sita Muyang fled, he didn't have the time to turn around and look behind him. Seeing the strange skeleton chasing after him, he couldn't help but click his tongue. It shouldn't be a zombie. Su Yi was also speechless. The people buried here were all the strong ancestors of the Divine Sword sect. What kind of people were they? How could they turn into corpses? There must have been some kind of shocking change inside. "What do we do now?" Sita Muyang asked Su Yi as he looked behind him. Fortunately, the skeletons behind them were not flying, and their speed was about the same as theirs. However, for some reason, the number of skeletons was increasing. "Let's go to the mountain in front," Su Yi said. It seemed that he had no other choice. Even if he wanted to leave, there was no way out. F8 equals in the entire Divine Sword Valley. Not a single blade of grass grew on the mountain. It was deathly silent everywhere. Su Yi and Sita Muyang ran away, being chased by strange skeletons. It looked rather strange from afar. After more than an hour, they were getting closer and closer to the huge mountain in front of them. However, for some reason, the strange and terrifying aura that filled the air became denser and denser. Bang! 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 Suddenly, a violent commotion came from the front. Muffled sounds of energy could be heard unceasingly. Several figures appeared in front of Su Yi and Sita Muyang. A man and two women were currently being entangled by three skeletons. The violent energy surged. It seems to be Sakura Asaka, Gongqi, and Ouyang Ran. Sita Muyang recognized the three of them from afar. They were Sakura Asaka, Gongqi, and Ouyang Ran. Su Yi also recognized the three of them. He didn't expect that the three of them would appear here and be attacked by the strange skeletons. The three puppets seemed to be extremely powerful in the fierce battle in front of them. Sakura Asaka, Gongqi, and Ouyang Ran were already using their full strength. Their swords were as fast as lightning, but they were still no match for the three unarmed skeletons. They were defeated one after another. They were in a sorry state, and their bodies were already injured. They seemed to be in a lot of trouble. "Do you want to help them?" Sita Muyang asked Su Yi. After all, Sakura Asaka, Gongqi, and the others had never been polite to Su Yi. When the three of them were in the myriad sword battlefield, they had even chased after Su Yi and himself. Moreover, the strange skeletons behind them were also following them like shadows. They couldn't get rid of them at all. Swish swish, Sakura, Asaka, Gongqi, and Ouyang Xuan's complexion changed drastically. Their expressions were grave. They were obviously shocked by this unforeseen event. At this moment, the three of them were using their full strength, but it was still difficult for them to be a match for the three skeletons. They were retreating step by step. Their hair was disheveled, and their bodies were covered with injuries. Clang, the golden halberd exploded. The sword light in Gong Chi's hand slashed on the palm of the skeleton in front of him. Sparks flew everywhere, but the skeleton's palm was not damaged at all. Not even a mark was left on it. Instead, a sword tightly grabbed on a Gong Chi's sword. A strange aura spread out along the sword's body, and it could corrode vitality. Gong Chi's complexion changed drastically. Under that strange power, the vitality in her body was affected. The sword in her hand was tightly grasped, and she couldn't pull it out at all. Under the influence of that aura, even Gong Chi's soul was affected, and he began to feel dizzy. A skeleton claw immediately stretched out and instantly appeared in front of Gong Chi. It was filled with a terrifying black light, and the strange aura made her soul tremble. Oh no! Gong Chi's beautiful face turned pale. He felt the aura of death. Be careful, Sakura, Asaka exclaimed. However, her situation was not much better than Gong Chi's at this moment. She couldn't help him at all. Chila! In a split second, a blue-robed figure strangely appeared in front of Gong Chi. A frightening yuan power spread out like an erupting volcano. A fist that was accompanied by wind and thunder was emitted with a sonorous sound. It was like a low thunder roar as it directly collided with the skeletal claw. Boom! Such a collision caused sand and stones to fly around and the ground to tremble. Ding ding! The blue-robed figure and Gong Chi's figure were instantly shaken back. They staggered a few steps before stabilizing their bodies. Gong Chi finally got away. The strange aura just now disappeared, and a strong wind blew her back. Humph! He stamped his foot on the ground to stabilize his retreat. The blood in his body was surging, and a muffled groan came from his throat. He almost spat out a mouthful of blood. It's you. Seeing that the figure that suddenly appeared in front of her to save her was actually Su-Yi, Gong Chi's pale face was very surprised. She was still in shock. She had just escaped a disaster. The skeleton stood in the same place, its aura fluctuating. For some reason, the black light in its eyes began to diffuse. It seemed to be struggling. It looked at Su-Yi and Gong Chi, waved its hand, and pointed to the magnificent mountain. Its voice was hoarse and hoarse. Go to the mountain, go to the mountain. The two puppets that were dealing with Sakura, Asaka, and Ouyang Ran were also affected by something at this moment. The black light in their eyes fluctuated, but the effect was not as great as that of the puppet that had just fought with Su-Yi. However, it stopped attacking Sakura, Asaka, and Ouyang Ran. Go, go, Sita Muyang said loudly without stopping. Go. Su-Yi's expression sank. These skeletons were too difficult to deal with. They had no choice but to go to the mountain now. Gong Chi, Sakura, Asaka, and Ouyang Ran didn't dare to hesitate at this moment. They immediately followed behind Su-Yi with all their strength. The skeletons that had been chasing after Su-Yi and Sitamuyang were still in hot pursuit. The three skeletons that had just fought with Gong Chi and the other two were sluggish for a while. Their eyes were covered by the strange black light again, and they joined in the chase. What the hell is going on? Do you know what's going on with these skeletons? Sakura, Asaka, and the other two were following behind Su-Yi and Sitamuyang. They were still in a state of shock as they asked Su-Yi and Sitamuyang. We don't know either. Did you guys encounter young Master Du? Sitamuyang shook his head and asked. There are several of them, and they are all very terrifying. Ouyang Ran still had a lingering fear in his heart. The five of them were running at full speed. They were getting closer and closer to the huge mountain peak. However, the group of skeletons behind them was also getting closer and closer. Woo! Suddenly, in the void, there was a soul-stirring sound of breaking wind. In the void, in front of the five of them, a dazzling light flashed out like lightning. It carried a terrifying aura and swept across the sky. "Be careful!" Su let out a light shout. The aura on his body enveloped his entire body. He immediately shot out a palm print from his hand. Swish! When this light fell, it was a sword ray. It directly shattered Su Yi's palm print. The sword ray spread out. The terrifying aura caused Su Yi's complexion to change greatly. He activated the rising Yao 100 transformation steps to the extreme. The soles of his feet touched the ground, and his figure rapidly dodged in an unimaginable arc swish. A cold light pierced his skin. Su Yi immediately had goosebumps all over his body. The aura barrier on his body shattered, and a few strands of his hair were cut off. A shallow wound appeared on his neck. Under the terrifying aura, Su Yi stumbled back with a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. If he did not have the rising Yao 100 transformation steps, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Woo! The sound of breaking wind resounded. A treasured sword appeared in the void. Its light was terrifying, and it was surrounded by a black light. This is a treasure. It's of a very high level. Sakura Asaka, Ouyang Ran, Gongqi, and Situ Muyang's complexion changed. This single sword was actually attacking them. Woo-woo. The sword made a woo-woo sound, and the black light rippled. Then, it exploded into a large sword ray. It swooped down from the sky. The sword ray rushed out and enveloped Sakura Asaka, Situ Muyang, Ouyang Ran, and Gongqi. Not good. It was just a strange sword, but the four of them knew how terrifying it was. Even someone as powerful as Su Yi was injured by it. Let's attack together. The four of them formed a tacit understanding and attacked together. Even Situ Muyang pulled out his treasured sword. For sword rays swept out with all his might. Woo-woo-woo-woo. Chapter 573. Clang, 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 clang. The sound of metal clanging resounded as blinding sword flashes sent four figures flying. The extraordinary swords in their hands were completely shattered, leaving only their sword hilts. The four of them landed on the ground and spat out blood. Hua, Situ Muyang, Sakura Asaka, Ouyang Ran, and Gongqi were in wretched states. They were horrified as blood trickled down the corners of their mouths. Woo-woo. The void sword hummed as it emitted a black beam of light. The sword Chi was terrifying as it transformed into a black bolt of lightning that slashed at the nearest Ouyang Ran. It was too fast as Ouyang Ran's pupils constricted. The sword beam expanded in his pupils like lightning. Ouyang Ran had no time to dodge as a chill crept up from the bottom of his heart. Clang! He was shocked. At that moment, a crimson sword beam blocked the black sword beam. A blue-robed youth appeared in front of Ouyang Ran and blocked the black sword light with a broken sword. The blue-robed youth was none other than Su Yi. The sword was the broken sword that Su Yi always carried on his back. The black sword beam boomed as a terrifying aura surged. An extremely strange power that seemed to corrode everything surged into Su Yi's body through the broken sword. The strange power wanted to destroy Su Yi and shatter Su Yi's broken sword. Boom! Against the strange corrosive power, Su Yi circulated the primordial chaos supreme technique and the Heaven Fei ancient sutra almost simultaneously to resist the strange power. Especially the domineering and destructive aura of Su Yi's primordial chaos supreme technique. It easily destroyed the strange power. Boom! And at the same time, the broken sword seemed to stir under the impact of the strange power. Instantly, it shimmered resplendently as a monstrous sword beam surged out. Hula! A monstrous killing intent also surged into Su Yi's body along with the sword beam. The killing intent caused Su Yi's vision to blur. He once again saw the scene of blood flowing like a river and corpses piling up. This kind of killing intent was too terrifying, as if it wanted to destroy everything. Su Yi's body and cultivation were much stronger than before, but at this time his body was still trembling under the impact of the killing intent, as if it was about to be crushed by the killing intent. However, at that moment, the power of the killing intent directly resisted the strange power from the black sword light. At this moment, the broken sword was like a king that had been provoked, like a sleeping dragon that had been disturbed. Buzz buzz. W update I plus new Z on non the broken sword. Resplendent rays of light shone. Wind and thunder clanged, and that terrifying aura was like that of a monstrous beast awakening. Chi-la. Sword chi filled the sky and sword light was dazzling. It directly rushed out and forced the black light soar back. Break! Su, he let out a short shout, and a bloody killing intent quietly climbed up his eyes. The bloody light was awe-inspiring, and without hesitation, he tightly gripped the broken sword and slashed out. Whoosh! Wherever the sword light passed, the void was turbulent, and it swept out with the killing intent that filled the sky. That strange sword body seemed to have felt something, and the whooshing sound of the wind was constantly heard. Suddenly, dense black sword light burst out. Every single one of the densely packed sword lights seemed to be able to cut through the void as they shot out in unison. A strange aura filled the air, covering the sky and covering the earth. The scene was horrifying, and the light in the surroundings dimmed. Clang! The sword light collided. Su Yi's sword seemed thin, but the monstrous killing intent burst out and turned into endless sword chi that swept in all directions. It was like a flood pouring down, covering this part of the void. There was a violent collision, and the golden spears collided. Gong Chi, Sakura Asaka, Sita Muyang, and Ouyang Ran were shocked, and their eyes were full of shock. They felt that if Su Yi used this sword a few days ago on Spirit Sword Peak, even someone as strong as Mu Yao would not be a match for it. In just a moment, the black sword light collapsed and was destroyed by the sword chi. Swish! A sword light that contained monstrous killing intent directly cut the sword body wrapped in black light. Crack! The sword was cut into two, and the strange sword body was broken. Sakura, Asaka, Gong Chi, and the others stared at Su Yi in horror. They were so shocked that they could not be more shocked. It turned out that this inconspicuous broken sword was actually so powerful. At this moment, the dazzling light and aura that spread out from the broken sword made it not difficult for Ouyang Ran and the others to know that it was definitely a precious treasure. Thud, thud. Su Yi staggered and retreated. Under the impact of the terrible killing intent in the broken sword, some parts of Su Yi's body even cracked, and his flesh was badly mutilated. Blood flowed out, and he looked like a bloody man. Whoosh, whoosh! The skeletons that had been chasing behind them were getting closer and closer. Go quickly! The killing intent did not completely affect Su Yi, and he maintained his last bit of consciousness. This was not a place to stay for long. Whoosh, whoosh! No one dared to stay any longer. It was too dangerous, and they quickly left. Su Yi got rid of the broken sword's influence. He did not have time to think about why the broken sword reacted just now. He carried the broken sword on his back again and headed toward the majestic mountain peak. The majestic mountain peak towered into the clouds. It was incomparably huge. The mountain was surrounded by steep cliffs, and black clouds drifted in the surroundings. It was filled with a strange aura. When Su Yi, Situ Muyang, and the others appeared at the foot of the mountain in a panic, many figures had already appeared. These figures were Zhang Lingyun, Jian Shi, Oluo, Gu Chunyu, and more than 10 people. At this moment, these people looked more miserable than Su Yi and Sita Muyang. They looked at each other and secretly changed their expressions. Zhang Lingyun, Jian Shi, Gu Chunyu, and the others seemed to have just arrived. Boom! Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. The aura was vast and mighty, and electric arcs flickered. Ryugan River appeared. His whole body was covered with electric arcs, and he was covered with a thunder armor. His expression was solemn, and he looked just as miserable. Immediately after, 2 more auras appeared. A graceful golden figure was fierce and domineering. Her eyes were also filled with a golden color. It was Mu Yao. A white-clothed figure was shrouded in radiance. His aura was surging and vigorous. His hair was disheveled, and his white clothes were stained with blood. It was Yunling Feng. The 18 people met at the foot of the mountain and arrived one after another. Su Yi's gaze swept across them. It was not difficult to tell from their current appearance that everyone had encountered the same situation. It was already lucky that no one had died on the way. You guys also encountered those skeletons. Gu Chunyu looked at the people who had just arrived. They were still in shock, and their hair was disheveled. Their auras were weak, and they asked everyone. Everyone looked at each other and nodded. They were already sure that everyone had encountered the same situation. Whoosh, whoosh, the sound of wind breaking resounded in all directions. Strange skeletons leaped out from all directions and appeared at the foot of the mountain. At this moment, the skeletons from all directions added up to over 100, surrounding the 18 people in the middle. Not good. These skeletons are too strange. They're difficult to deal with. Chapter 574. Yunling Feng arrived at Mu Yao's side. His eyes were filled with concern as he said, "If we join hands, our chances of victory will be higher. Join hands, otherwise no one will be able to handle it." Mu Yao glanced at him indifferently and ignored him. Instead, she immediately spoke to everyone. Her body was enveloped by golden radiance, and a tyrannical, demonic aura pervaded the air. With Mu Yao's status and strength, everyone immediately closed in on her as soon as she finished speaking. Yunling Feng seemed to be a little embarrassed, but he didn't mind it at all. With a smile on his face, he said to Mu Yao, "Let's join hands. Nothing could be better than this." Boom! Those skeletons appeared without any delay. The ones that arrived first already pounced on the nearest person. Rumble! Some people clashed with each other in panic. The gale collided with each other, and the sword ray swept across. Stomp, stomp, pfff, but very quickly, some people vomited blood and retreated. They were no match for the skeletons. Boom! Very quickly, all the skeletons had already surrounded them. A strange black light burst out from their hollow eye sockets. Specks of black spots appeared on the originally ghastly white skeletons. "We are in big trouble." Situ Muyang deployed the Imperial Wind battlesuit and attacked with all his might. Bang! Su Yi threw a punch at the skeletons, but he was forced to retreat. His aura was rolling over and over. Rumble! Ryugan River was also attacking with all his might. Amidst the resplendent lightning, the armor on his body was simple and unadorned. It was emitting a greenish-white color. The lightning aura and simple aura were released. The electric arcs flickered and sizzled. A terrifying aura pervaded the air. Mu Yao's beautiful figure was suffused with golden radiance. Her jade-like palm seemed to be covered by the golden radiance. It carried an incomparably sharp aura. The golden radiance formed an energy storm along with the gale as she battled against 3 skeletons. Roar! The shadow of the blood-eyed, demonic wind wolf appeared under Yunling Feng's feet. It was glowing brightly, its claws were like hooks, and its fangs were gleaming. It was incomparably ruthless, and its entire body was incomparably swift and fierce. Yunling Feng's robe and hair fluttered in the wind. He stepped on the shadow of the blood-eyed, demonic wind wolf and engaged in a fierce battle with the skeletons. Su had just stabilized himself after being knocked back, when a skeleton strangely pounced at him from the side. Su Yi's eyes darkened. At the same time, a vortex-like light gushed out from his clear and deep eyes. A terrifying aura filled the air with an ancient charm that seemed capable of suppressing the surroundings. The heavenly demon, ancient scripture, was operating at its peak. Bang, bang, bang. At this moment, everyone was giving it their all. Sword light poured down in torrents, blotting out the sky and covering the earth. No one held back. PFFF. However, even though everyone was fighting with all their might, they were still no match for so many strange skeletons. Just by exchanging blows, some of them were sent flying while coughing up blood. Woo-woo. Suddenly, there were skeletons climbing down from the majestic mountain peak like apes. Above the void, whooshing sounds of wind breaking resounded. At least a dozen strange swords wrapped in black light broke through the void and appeared. They were wrapped in a frightening aura and were suspended in midair. I'm afraid we're all doomed this time. Ouyang Ran was sent retreating. When he saw more and more skeletons and the strange swords around him, his expression turned extremely grave. The skeletons were already impossible to deal with, but now there were more and more of them. The strange swords were even more terrifying. Swish, swish, in the void, the strange black swords whooshed through the air. Large swaths of sword light carried a sharp and frightening killing intent as they slashed down at the crowd. The terrifying aura enveloped the area, causing the void to tremble. Everyone present was apprehensive, knowing that they could not withstand it. Boom! Suddenly, the void trembled in the blink of an eye. A resplendent golden light surged out. A large swath of golden sword light tore through the air and blocked the strange black light. Clang, clang. Golden weapons clashed, sending sparks flying and strong winds surging. Amidst the resplendent light, a thin figure appeared in the void. He held a sword that was suffused with golden light. Everyone looked over in surprise. Without a doubt, it was this person who had saved them. However, when everyone looked at the figure that appeared, their gazes turned serious once again. Strictly speaking, this was not a person, but a mummy. A mummy that had yet to become a skeleton. The muscles and skin on its body had already dried up and covered its bones with wrinkles. Its face was so shriveled that it looked like a piece of shriveled human skin was stuck on it. Its eyes were filled with golden light. But at this moment, when this mummy-like figure appeared, the aura on its body was incomparably powerful. Golden Rainbow Sword. Could it be the elder Jin Ming who had reached the end of his life 100 years ago? Gu Qinyu was surprised. It was the Golden Rainbow Sword. He had seen an introduction at the Shunjian Gate. It was the elder Jin Ming's item, and his master's grandmaster was the elder Jin Ming, so he had paid special attention to it. Hundreds of years ago, the elder Jin Ming had relied on the Golden Rainbow Sword to defeat many experts. And now, with the appearance of the Golden Rainbow Sword and the strange changes in the Divine Sword Valley, Gu Qinyu had to suspect that this mummy-like figure was the elder Jin Ming who had reached the end of his life 100 years ago. Woo-woo. Following the appearance of the mummy, the skeletons and strange sword bodies seemed to have sensed something, and all of them stared at the mummy with their invisible auras. This time, so many people have come. They're finally here. Go up, go up. A hoarse voice came out from the mummy's mouth, as if it was with great difficulty. Most 6 New G Chapter J 5 Section 6S1/7/woo-woo. Under the whooshing sound of breaking wind, the strange sword bodies exploded and enveloped the mummy's figure. Whoosh, whoosh. The skeleton's eye sockets fluctuated with black light as they continued to pounce towards Su, Yi, and the others. Go up the mountain, go. The mummy's figure shouted hoarsely. His voice was hoarse. His shriveled body erupted with boundless golden light. The golden rainbow sword in his hand resounded with the sound of wind and thunder. A large amount of light burst out, as if forming a sharp storm that swept through the air and the ground, blocking the large amount of strange sword attacks and skeletons. Whoosh! Yin Lingfeng stepped on the blood. A demonic wind wolf shadow formed from his vitality, and immediately headed up the mountain. The supreme benefits were left behind by the Shunjian Gate's ancestor on the mountain. He could not miss it. Let's go up the mountain. Seeing that, Gu Qinyu, Zhang Lingyun, Jian Shi, and the others all had their vitality transformed into beast shadows that soared into the air and headed up the mountain. Muyao, Ryugan River, Sakura, Osaka, Gongqi, and the others did not delay. The supreme benefits were also their purpose in entering the Divine Sword Valley this time. Basui, let's go. Sita Myong clenched his teeth. Although he knew that it was dangerous, he had already brought it to the foot of the mountain, so he naturally could not miss it. Furthermore, in this situation, there seemed to be no way out. Let's go. Su Yi nodded. The vitality on his back condensed into a pair of wings and was about to fly up the mountain. Bang, 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 bang. Chapter 575. Fortunately, These people were lucky and were not seriously injured. They fell to the ground and vomited blood, but they were not seriously injured. We can only climb up. Sita Muyang was still scared. Fortunately, he did not rush up first. He looked at the majestic mountain peak in front of him. There were no stone steps or paths. Yin Lingfeng happened to appear nearby. He looked at Su Yi indifferently. Seeing that Su Yi had escaped, he seemed a little disappointed. He took the opportunity to overtake Su Yi. Su Yi narrowed his eyes and looked at the peak of the mountain. He continued to climb up, but he had to be more careful. Bang! Not far away, Muyao also encountered danger. A skeleton suddenly appeared and attacked her from behind. Boom! Muyao's body was shrouded in golden light. Her aura became overbearing and fierce as she fought fiercely. After a few moves, the skeleton did not seem to have any intelligence. It only had the instinct to kill. It fell down. The mountain was very big. The higher they went, the less dangerous it was. Everyone climbed higher and closer to the peak. The battle between the mysterious mummified expert and the strange sword-body skeletons had already reached below the crowd. Whoosh whoosh, a strange sword light suddenly swept down from the peak of the mountain and came down from above. Rumble, from the peak of the mountain, there were many boulders rolling down. Those boulders were more than 1,000 pounds. If they were swept up, they would be smashed into meat paste. Be careful. Everyone jumped left and right. Not only did they have to avoid the strange sword light, but they also had to avoid the boulders rolling down from the top. They were in a sorry state. Fortunately, the sword light and boulders were not particularly dense. Everyone had a chance to reach the peak of the mountain. At the peak of the mountain, the terrain was no longer steep. It gradually became flat. Whoosh whoosh, one figure after another jumped to the peak of the mountain and appeared on the peak. Everyone was very careful. They circulated the primordial qi in their bodies to guard against any sudden danger. On the peak of the mountain, black fog lingered. The surrounding light was dim, and the aura was extremely terrifying. Many stone platforms appeared in front of him, each of them about 10 feet in size. Some of the stone platforms had bone fragments scattered on them. These white bones were the same as the skeletons they had encountered before. There were some kind of black spots on them. The stone platforms were densely packed, all the way to the highest point of the mountain peak. Many of the stone platforms had swords inserted into them. The stone platforms were arranged in an orderly manner. The precious swords shone and intertwined with each other. It was as if they were connected together by some kind of formless, profound law. Above the treasured sword, there was a faint light that connected with the fluctuating sword qi. Finally, it spread to a stone platform on the highest peak. At this moment, there was an ancient stone platform at the highest peak. It was a round one, 5 m in size, square in shape, and it was densely inscribed with unfamiliar talisman markings that flickered with light. There were many crisscrossing swords on the stone platform. In the end, they were all connected to the stone platform. This is the Dark Light Sword. Suddenly, Ryugan River cried out. On the stone platform in front of him, he saw a treasured sword inserted into the stone platform. The sword's body was flickering with mysterious runes and fluctuating with an ancient aura. It was entirely scarlet red like flowing magma. Dark Light Sword, it's really the Dark Light Sword. Gu Qinyu, Oluo, Ouyang Ran, and the others also exclaimed. Their eyes were filled with astonishment. Chapter 576. Ouyang Ran whispered to Su Yi. He knew that Su Yi didn't know much about the Xinjiang Gate. Green Abyss Blazing Sword, Great Baron Ancient Sword. That's the Fengyang Sword, and the Thunder Dragon Sky Demon Sword. Cries of surprise spread out, and the disciples of the Divine Sword sect almost lost their voices. The swords on the stone platforms were all famous and had left behind many legends. They had followed the ancestors of Xinjiang Gate and dominated the world. At this moment, these legendary swords of Xinjiang Gate had appeared in front of their eyes. How could they not be excited? The supreme benefits will belong to the fated ones. Someone spoke. It was Yu Shanha. He looked at the swords on the stone platforms and suppressed the fire in his eyes. He immediately rushed towards the peak of the mountain. The supreme benefits were left behind by the ancestors of Shunjian Gate. This was their real goal this time. Yushanha was no exception. He wanted to get it. Boom! Just as Yushanha rushed out and got close to the stone platforms, the entire mountain suddenly trembled. The stone platforms with the swords on them seemed to come to life at the same time and began to emit light. \I, initial, buzz buzz. At the same time, the swords on the platforms also trembled and emitted a sonorous sound. Swish swish. Rays of light spread out from the swords and connected in a mysterious trajectory, enveloping the entire mountain peak. On the light shield, there were many faint shadows of sword light. Upon closer inspection, these sword shadows were very similar to the swords on the stone platforms. There seemed to be a mysterious connection between them. They were filled with sharp sword aura. Swish! Just as Yushanha jumped out, he was instantly blocked by the light shield. Sword light swept out from it and turned into a sword tide that covered the sky and earth. Oh no! Yushanha's expression changed. He immediately drew his sword and used all his strength. Swish! A sword light swept out and landed directly on Yushanha's body, leaving wounds on his shoulder and waist. Blood flowed out. Fortunately, Yushanha retreated in time and avoided his vital parts. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. As he retreated, Yushanha's face was as pale as ash. His eyes were still in shock. On the light shield, the sword light disappeared. Are you trying to stop us? Qin Fang's figure jumped out. The supreme benefits left behind by the ancestors of Shunjian Gate were right in front of him. He didn't want to miss out on this opportunity. Yuan Qi surged as his feet touched the ground. He wanted to rush into the light shield. Swish! As Qin Fang approached, sword light suddenly shot out from within the light barrier. A large amount of sword light swept out, and a swift and fierce explosion erupted. Qin Fang was already mentally prepared, but he was unable to retreat unscathed. He pulled out his sword with all his might, but in the end, he retreated with injuries. His chest and thighs were bleeding from the sword light. Swish! 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 When the crowd saw this, they were originally afraid that others would be the first to arrive. However, at this moment, all of them had no choice but to be cautious. That mysterious light barrier seemed to be preventing them from approaching. Nan Lalan, Gong Qi, and Gu Qinyu were not convinced and wanted to give a try. But the result was the same. The three of them were prepared. Even with their full strength, they were still blocked and retreated with injuries. However, the mysterious light shield only stopped them from moving forward. As long as they didn't get close, it wouldn't attack them. He was looking at the light shield. He didn't dare to try. Even Gu Qinyu wasn't a match for it just now. It was enough to prove how strange the light shield was. Is that so? Suddenly, Sword 11 walked out. His black robe fluttered slightly. His expression was solemn as he slowly walked to the front of the light shield. The sharp sword Qi was intimidating, causing everyone in the surroundings to feel fearful and uneasy. Just as the sharp sword light was about to reach him, Sword 11 moved. He swung the sword in his hand, and a sword light exploded. It moved in a strange arc towards one of the sword lights. Chilala! A strange scene appeared. There was no sound of metal clashing, as everyone expected. Just as the sword light touched, the large expanse of sword light above the light shield shattered inch by inch in front of Sword 11. Swish, swish. Only a few scattered sword lights flashed out, cutting off a few strands of Sword 11's hair, leaving shallow bloodstains around his ears. But at this moment, a crack appeared on the light shield in front of Sword 11. Sword 11's eyes lit up, and he immediately leaped up and entered the light shield. As Sword 11's figure swept in, the light shield also returned to normal. What happened? Qin Fang, Yushanha, and the others were dumbfounded. The 11th sword actually went in. Gu Qinyu was even more surprised. In terms of strength, he was stronger than Sword 11 no matter what. But Gu Qinyu was the clearest that even he could not block the sword light that erupted above the light shield. So Sword 11 should not be able to block it. I see, haha. Yin Lingfeng laughed. seeming to have seen through the clues. Chi surged from the soles of his feet, and his figure swept out. Swish, swish. The light shield was as usual, and the sword light that erupted swept down. The aura was incomparably terrifying. Yinling Feng made his move. With a sword in hand, his expression was solemn, but the corner of his mouth lifted into a confident smile. The sword light in his hand was strange, and it collided with the sword light that erupted above the light shield. Clang, clang. There was a sound of metal clashing, but the strange thing was that it was caused by Yinling Feng's sword light. The sword light that erupted on the light shield in front of him suddenly collapsed and disappeared, and then cracks appeared. Ha ha! Yinling Feng laughed and leaped in, also entering the light shield. Swish, swish, two figures swept out at the same time. One was a beautiful figure filled with golden light, and the other was a tall figure wrapped in lightning. These two people were Mu Yao and Ryugan River. At this moment, they seemed to have seen through the clues and went to the light shield. Swish, swish. On the light shield, the sword light fluctuated, bringing along a large amount of light, blocking Mu Yao and Ryugan River. At this moment, a sword appeared in the hands of Mu Yao and Ryugan River at the same time. Their expressions were solemn as they went to meet the light shield. Swish, swish. The sword light erupted, and the light scattered in all directions. In front of the light shield, cracks appeared. Ryugan River and Mu Yao also rushed into the light shield. What's going on? Why did they all go in? And why can't we go in? Seeing that Yinling Feng, Sword 11, Ryugan River, and Mu Yao had already entered, the rest of the people were even more dumbfounded. The supreme benefit was inside the light shield. Chapter 577. What's going on? Sita Muyang was also a little dumbfounded. He had been staring at the light barrier. When he came back to his senses, his eyes lit up as he said to Situ Muyang, "Perhaps it has something to do with sword principles. This light barrier doesn't test one's strength. It tests one's sword principles." As soon as he finished speaking, He stepped forward. Yuan Qi fluctuated under his feet, and his figure was like an afterimage as he directly swept towards the light barrier. Swish, 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 swish. A large amount of sword light suddenly burst out. The incomparably sharp sword qi intertwined and swept towards Yi from all directions. G5 inside. Yi could feel how terrifying this sword qi was. It was as if it could destroy everything. Sidumuyang's clear eyes lit up at this moment. He narrowed his eyes and stared intently at Yi in front of him. Just as the sword light was about to reach Yi, the aura on Yi's body had already changed. An invisible aura spread out, and two rays of sword light swept out from the depths of his eyes. An otherworldly aura also spread out from his body, along with a great pressure. Swish! Under many gazes, Yi moved. He shook his arm and used his hand as a sword. A ray of Yuan Qi light condensed into a sword light, and with a sharp sound of wind breaking, it directly swept towards the sword light in front of him. Clang, 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 clang. The sword light condensed from Yuan Qi also emitted a violent sound of metal exploding. It brought with it a violent gust of wind that swept out in all directions in an instant. Many gazes immediately became stunned. The sword light on the light barrier shattered inch by inch and turned into nothingness. A crack appeared in front of Yi. Swish! Yi took the opportunity to enter and also enter the light barrier. Yi also went in. Xia Changqing, Si Xuan, and the others' expressions changed before they could see any clues. Several people had already entered, but they still couldn't find any clues. Sword Dao, Situ, Muyang pondered and pondered. This is a test of the Sword Dao. Only those who are qualified can enter. Sakura Asuka's eyes glowed and flickered. She seemed to have understood something. Yi immediately sensed a familiar aura enveloping his surroundings. It was so familiar that it could affect his soul. On the surrounding stone platforms, those precious swords shone. They were suffused with an aura, and they were invisibly connected. Whoosh whoosh, the gazes of Jianxi, Yun Lingfeng, Mu Yao, and Ryugan River, who had entered earlier, did not land on these once famous treasured swords. At this moment, everyone's gazes had landed on the square, ancient stone platform at the very front. Voila! Suddenly, the mysterious patterns on the square stone platform fluctuated and trembled slightly. A ray of light appeared in the middle, and a crack appeared. A sword hilt was revealed, and it slowly rose up. It was a treasured sword. The sword's body was as red as blood. It was crystal clear and filled with treasure light. The treasured sword was about 3 feet long. It emitted a brilliant sword light, and many mysterious patterns and symbols lingered around it. Buzz, buzz. When this treasured sword appeared, it immediately resounded with wind and thunder. The entire mountain seemed to be trembling. There were huge rocks all around that cracked and rolled down. With a rumbling sound, the scene was incomparably terrifying. Buzz, buzz. At the same time, the treasured swords on the surrounding stone platforms all resounded with sword cries. They were sonorous and incessant, bursting with light, as if they were on a pilgrimage. Oh my God, that must be the supreme benefit left behind by the ancestor. That's a divine weapon, left behind by the ancestor. Everyone could clearly see everything that was happening inside the light shield. That scene made their hearts tremble. Inside the light shield, Jianxi, Ryugan River, and the others were even more shocked. The legendary supreme benefit left behind by the ancestor of Shunjian Gate was right in front of them. It was a divine weapon. Jianxi's pitch-black eyes fluctuated with light. He bowed to the divine weapon on the stone platform in the middle, and then his figure rushed out. Humph! Yin Lingfeng let out a cold snort from his throat, but he did not stop him. Mu Yao and Lu Yunchuan's eyes moved. They were also observing. This place was extremely strange. They felt that the divine weapon would not be so easy to obtain. Soon, Jianxi arrived in front of the divine weapon. Yuan Qi circulated in his body. He stretched out his hand and directly grabbed the divine weapon. Buzz! At this moment, above the square stone platform, a bright and dazzling light suddenly emerged. The light flowed and enveloped the divine weapon. Qila! Jianxi stretched out his hand and grabbed the light shield, causing it to fluctuate. Boom! A mighty and unparalleled force swept out and fiercely hit Jianxi's body. Puff! Without turning back, Jianxi spat out a large mouthful of blood. His body flew backward like a short-winged bird, smashing into the side of Su Yi, Ryugan River, and the others. Jianxi struggled a few times before getting up. His eyes were filled with shock, and his breath was weak. The hand that just touched the light shield was badly mutilated, and blood flowed out. Everyone was shocked, but fortunately, they did not act rashly. The divine weapon is spiritual and will choose its own master. It needs to be communicated, and only those who are fated will know. Ryugan River gritted his teeth, his eyes burning. Such a divine weapon, the supreme benefits left behind by the old ancestor, would allow one to dominate the world unhindered. Who could resist such a temptation? Boom! Lightning fluctuated on his body. Ryugan River wanted to try. He arranged the lightning armor, and his hand was also covered. He appeared in front of the divine weapon, and his hand slowly pushed forward, trying to communicate with it, wanting to obtain it. Boom! An unparalleled mighty force erupted, and countless sword lights poured out at the same time. The speed was too fast, and suddenly attacked. Ryugan River was prepared, but at this moment, he was still directly sent flying. Blood spurted out of his mouth, and the lightning armor on his body became dim. There were many cracks on it, and he fell to the ground. Boom! Just at this moment, a resplendent golden radiance erupted. Mu Yao's beautiful figure pounced out. Monstrous golden radiance swept out from her delicate body. Her body also underwent a strange transformation. Her skin was suffused with a golden luster, and an indescribable tyrannical and fierce aura spread out. In the next instant, a strange golden radiance spread over Mu Yao's body, and the bones in her entire body emitted crackling sounds. Her arms seemed to be expanding, and golden light pervaded the air. On her palms, there was a feather-like golden light overflowing. A terrifying demonic aura spread out, and behind her, it condensed into a huge shadow of a golden-winged rock. Everything was as fast as lightning. Just as Ryugan River's body was sent flying, Mu Yao had already arrived. She completely merged with the shadow of the golden-winged rock behind her, as if she had transformed into a real golden-winged rock. Golden light filled the sky. At this moment, Mu Yao was like a real rock descending. She waved her hand, and layers of visible golden feathers, like sharp scales, whistled and probed into the light shield. Swoosh, swoosh. On the light shield, a sword light flashed and burst out. Clang, clang. Chapter 578. In her panic, Mu Yao wrapped her arms around her body like the wings of a rock. Clang, clang. Sparks clashed, and Mu Yao was sent flying. She spat out blood and fell to the ground. When she got up, Mu Yao had returned to her normal appearance. Her hair was disheveled, and her body was covered in wounds and blood. She was in a sorry state. How powerful! I can't take it by force. Su-yi was the clearest about Mu Yao's strength. Yet, she was still severely injured. This made Su-yi speechless. It seemed that the treasure left behind by the Xinjiang Gates patriarch was not to be taken by force. The treasure will choose its own owner. The fated one will obtain it. Su-yi pondered. He walked toward the stone platform in front of him, wanting to give it a try. The reason why Su-yi chose to stay in the Divine Sword sect was because of this unparalleled benefit. Now that the benefit was right in front of him, it was no longer just a temptation to Su-yi. Since he was already here, he had to get it. Moof. Seeing Su-yi step forward, Yin Lingfeng's eyes flashed with coldness. He sneered. He was happy to see this brat severely injured. It would be best if he died. Did he think that this supreme benefit could be obtained so easily? Su-yi stood before the stone platform and looked at the crimson divine weapon on the light screen. His eyes glowed. This was left behind by the Xinjiang Gates patriarch. Perhaps it contained the inheritance of the Xinjiang Gates patriarch. If he could obtain it, it would be a supreme benefit. I need to communicate with it. The treasure will choose its own owner. I can't take it by force, Su-yi muttered to himself with a solemn expression. A formless soul energy spread out from his mind and approached the light screen. He wanted to connect with the divine weapon and communicate with it. Su-yi was very careful. He didn't dare to be careless. This was soul energy. Once the soul was injured, it would be much more serious than physical injuries. That was also the reason why everyone feared soul tamers. A soul controller's attacks mostly attack the soul directly, or their martial arts attacks contained soul attacks. Once one's soul was injured, no matter how light it was, it would affect one's future cultivation. In the Myriad Sword Conference's final peak confrontation, Yin Lingfeng had been too confident in his soul attack. However, Yin Lingfeng still didn't know that Su-yi's soul was even stronger than his physical body. The heavenly origin demon soul was too abnormal, which was why Yin Lingfeng was defeated so miserably by Su-yi. A wisp of incorporeal soul power slowly approached the light screen. Su-yi was on high alert. The invisible spiritual strength approached the light curtain. However, due to Su-yi's cautiousness, the light curtain did not react. Su-yi's soul force penetrated the light screen and approached the divine weapon on the stone platform. This was only possible after Su-yi had cultivated the heavenly origin demon soul. Otherwise, he would not have been able to release his soul power like this. Buzz! The divine weapon rumbled as Su-yi's soul force came into contact with it, causing it to tremble. On the crimson sword, ancient runes began to fluctuate. Crack! Suddenly, the stone platform trembled as the divine weapon sank back into the stone platform. Not good. Su-yi's eyes darkened. If the divine weapon were to be retracted, all his efforts would be wasted. Instantly, he released his soul energy, and a formless soul energy gushed out, wrapping around the divine weapon. Buzz! The divine weapon rumbled as if it was affected by something. The crimson light became even more resplendent. Its aura surged, as if it was trying to break free from the control of Su Yi's soul force. It was not easy for him to connect with the divine weapon. How could Su Yi be willing to give up? His soul force surged and wrapped around the divine weapon. Boom! The divine weapon shone brightly, and a blood-red light burst forth. The invisible, terrifying aura caused the light that enveloped the surroundings to fluctuate continuously, creating violent ripples. Rumble! At this moment, the entire mountain peak was shaking along with it. The earth was quaking and the mountains were shaking. Is Su Yi going to succeed? Could it be that Su Yi has communicated with the divine weapon? Looking at the commotion, everyone was surprised. Ryugan River, Mu Yao, and Jianxi were also shocked. Yin Lingfeng's eyes were filled with coldness. The coldness in his eyes had turned into astonishment, and his expression immediately changed. Whoosh! Yin Lingfeng was no longer calm as he rushed out. He was afraid that Su Yi had really communicated with the divine weapon. After all, there were too many strange things about this kid. This supreme benefit must not fall into the hands of others. In front of the light screen, Yin Lingfeng gritted his teeth as a small jade bottle appeared in his hand. He crushed the jade bottle in his palm as a drop of blood flowed out and landed on his palm. Boom! This drop of blood burst out with a bright light, as if it was going to merge into Yin Lingfeng's palm. The blood light was like the sun as an ancient aura filled the air. Yin Lingfeng stretched out his hand, and his palm landed on the light screen. Suddenly, the light screen surged as if there was a tsunami. On the light screen, rays of light burst out as if countless sword lights were shooting out. However, at this moment, from Yin Lingfeng's palm, a bloodlight filled the sky as if a blood moon had descended. It could spread to everything and gradually climbed onto the light screen. At the same time, the divine weapon on the stone platform seemed to be attracted by something as it vibrated violently. The light screen became more and more dazzling. The divine weapon that was about to retract back to the stone platform rose up again as if it was trying to break free from the stone platform. Crack, crack. On the quaint stone platform, mysterious and ancient symbols glowed. A vast aura fluctuated as if it was trying to bind the divine weapon. However, in the end, the surroundings began to crack. What's going on? Yin Lingfeng seems to have communicated with the divine weapon too. Yin Lingfeng seems to be a little abnormal. There's something strange about that bloodlight. Looking at the movement caused by Yin Lingfeng, Gongqi, Sakura, Asaka, Oluo, and the others who were outside the light screen saw it clearly and were shocked. Ryugan River, Sword 11, and Mu Yao, who were inside the light screen, were even more shocked. Buzz! Soon, the divine weapon rose up and left the quaint stone platform. The sound of the sword was like wind and thunder, and a blood-red light burst out. At this moment, the light screen around the quaint stone platform shattered inch by inch and disappeared. Seeing this, Yin Lingfeng's eyes were filled with joy. Do you think you can get the divine weapon of the ancestor? Looking at Su Yi beside him, Yin Lingfeng shouted coldly. He immediately stepped out and grabbed the divine weapon with his palm that was covered in bloodlight. Su Yi had been surprised. His invisible soul power was connected to the divine weapon. He could clearly feel that there was an extremely strange aura on Yin Lingfeng's body at this moment. That bloodlight was even more strange. It seemed to be able to communicate with the divine weapon. However, the supreme benefit was right in front of him. It was not Su Yi's character to watch others get it. Whoosh! Chapter 579. Whoosh! But at the same time, a sharp and cold fingerprint swept past Su Yi's back. The sharp strength chi caused the hairs on the back of Su Yi's head to stand on end, and he had no choice but to be obstructed. Su Yi knew that the one who attacked was Yin Lingfeng, so he flipped his hand and released a palm print, causing his essence to leak out and condense into a shield of light. Chi! The strong winds collided, and the essence surged, causing the surrounding rocks to explode. Brat, you have no fate with the supreme benefits. You are not qualified to have them. Yun Lingfeng's cold voice came out. The corner of his mouth lifted into a cold sneer. His figure took the opportunity to rush over, and his hand that was covered with a strange blood light directly grabbed onto the sword hilt. Buzz! The divine armament rumbled endlessly, as if it had a great power that wanted to shake off Yun Lingfeng's palm. Yun Lingfeng's palm was filled with a strange blood light, and it burst out with a dazzling light. At this moment, the blood light seemed to carry the same kind of qi and directly covered the sword hilt. At the same time, Yun Lingfeng's eyes were filled with joy, and he immediately grabbed onto the sword hilt. Previous chapter, next chapter, boom. At this moment, the entire mountain peak trembled and the earth shook. Outside the Divine Sword Valley, Situ Luyun and the other elders had not left and were waiting nervously. Previous chapter, next chapter, boom. The entire Divine Sword Valley suddenly trembled, and from the depths of the void, clouds surged, and along the edge of the Divine Sword Valley, a mist rose. Bam! Immediately after, a loud, thunderous sound resounded, shaking the heavens and the earth, reverberating throughout the entire Xinjiang Gate. A resplendent light soared into the sky from within the Divine Sword Valley, and an unparalleled qi swept out in all directions with the Divine Sword Valley as the center, causing the entire Xinjiang Gate to be alarmed. Whoosh whoosh, inside the Xinjiang Gate, countless figures flew out, following the qi and looking at the source of the qi. Rumble. The earth shook, the clouds surged, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled, as if something terrifying was awakening. What's that? What's going on? Cries of alarm rang out one after another. The terrifying aura made the Xinjiang Gate disciples shudder with fear. A figure soared into the sky, broke through the air, and appeared outside the Divine Sword Valley. One figure after another appeared. Their auras were powerful, and the light on their bodies fluctuated as if a bright moon was descending. Everyone stared at the Divine Sword Valley in shock. All of them were elders and experts of the Xinjiang Gate. Such a huge commotion is unprecedented. Could it be that someone has obtained the ancestors' divine weapon? Some elders were extremely excited. Their eyes were trembling, and they were incomparably nervous. Every time a disciple entered the Divine Sword Valley, they would never cause such a commotion. Perhaps this time, there really was a disciple who had obtained the inheritance left behind by the patriarch. Someone has obtained supreme benefits and obtained the legacy of our patriarch. Is our Xinjiang Gate going to prosper this time? An old expert from Xinjiang Gate was extremely excited. Elder Bai Mingshan's figure also appeared in the void as he observed the commotion within the Divine Sword Valley. His eyes flickered with radiance. Buzz buzz woo woo. On the majestic mountain peak, light was overflowing into the sky, and the entire mountain was on the verge of collapse. The divine weapon was already in Yun Lingfeng's hands. His figure floated low in the air along with the divine weapon, his feet off the ground. The divine weapon clanged. Ancient runes and symbols lingered. The scarlet red light connected with Yun Lingfeng, and a terrifying aura soared into the sky, shaking the void. On Yun Lingfeng's palm, the blood light connected with the divine weapon. Quietly, half of Yun Lingfeng's eyes were as red as blood, while the other half was suffused with black spots. It was extremely strange and terrifying. Rumble. Above the vast void, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled, as if it was the end of the world. The entire majestic mountain seemed to be on the verge of cracking as it shot out endless rays of light, mixed with that terrifying aura. Buzz buzz! On the stone platforms, the treasured swords hummed in unison. Light filled the air and resounded through the clouds. Crack crack! The light barrier that was originally blocking Oluo, Sakura, Asaka, Gongqi, and the others also cracked and disappeared. Ding, ding. The light barrier disappeared, and a powerful impact swept out in all directions like a hurricane, causing everyone to be forced back. Ryugan River, Muyao, and Jianxi were no exception as they staggered back. The impact was too strong, and the aura was vast and terrifying. It was impossible to resist. Unparalleled benefits. Did Yun Lingfeng obtain the ancestors' divine weapon? Everyone's eyes trembled. Under such a terrifying scene, it seemed that Yun Lingfeng had already obtained the ancestors' divine weapon. What is Sui doing? Does he still want to fight? Yushan exclaimed. In the midst of the impact of the energy hurricane, there was still one person standing like a boulder. His legs had sunk into the rocks on the ground, and the surrounding cracks were cracking, refusing to retreat. That figure, if it was not Sui, who else could it be? One by one, gazes were fixed on Sui. The strangest thing about the energy impact was that it was mixed with a terrifying aura that affected one's soul, making it impossible to resist. Sui refused to retreat. The unparalleled benefits were right in front of him, and it would be a pity if he failed. If there was no fate, then he would force it. Whether it was fate or not, if he could get it, then he would get it first. Sui's character had always been like this. B3 Yang GGW Waifu. Asterisk fee to see small s say. It would be best if this unparalleled benefit was fated with him. If it was not, then he would be happy to snatch it. The terrifying aura affected the soul, but Sui could still resist it with the heavenly origin demon soul in his mind. Boom! Sui operated the origin supreme technique, and a domineering and majestic aura of destruction gushed out. Step by step, he moved forward in the energy hurricane. Step by step, Sui's feet landed on the ground, and the rocks on the ground cracked along the soles of his feet. The closer he got, the greater the impact of the terrifying energy. If it was not for Sui's diamond body, Sui's body would have been torn apart. This guy is too scary. Oluo clicked his tongue, and his heart jumped. He's definitely a ferocious person. Qin Fong clicked his tongue. He was very clear about the terror of the energy hurricane. Is this guy trying to snatch it by force? Ryugan River was in a sorry state, and there was a faint lightning in his eyes. Looking at Sui's actions, it seemed that he wanted to snatch the ancestors' divine weapon that had fallen into Yun Lingfeng's hands. Ryugan River clicked his tongue. This kind of treasure could only be obtained by those who were fated. It would choose its own owner, and it could not be forced. The ancestors' divine weapon has not been confirmed to belong to Yun Lingfeng. Anyone can snatch it. Sita Muyang curled his lips. He was very unhappy. What was snatching? The ancestors' divine weapon had not been confirmed to belong to Yun Lingfeng. Anyone could snatch it. The distance wasn't too far. Sui arrived in front of the divine weapon, and his eyes were filled with scarlet light. The divine weapon rumbled and emitted a dazzling light, causing lightning to flash and thunder to roll. The wind rose and clouds surged. Yun Lingfeng's eyes were covered by the scarlet light, and there were frightening black spots. It was as if he had entered a strange state and was connected to the divine weapon. It was as if he did not see Sui. Sui raised his eyes, and the origin supreme technique in his body was operated to the extreme. An aura that could not be provoked gushed out. It was domineering, sharp, and majestic. He leaped out and directly grabbed the divine weapon. Swish! Chapter 580. Boom! H. Din Suyi's body, the origin supreme technique, seemed to have been provoked. Its aura erupted and forcefully wrapped around the divine weapon, wanting to sweep it away. However, at this moment, a monstrous and terrifying aura swept out from the divine weapon like a torrential demonic aura. It rushed straight into Suyi's body and into Suyi's mind. In an instant, Sui saw corpses strewn across the land, an endless abyss, and the wailing of ghosts and gods. Everything was destroyed and destroyed. This scene was different from what Sui saw in the Broken Sword. Although these scenes were equally terrifying, the scene in front of him was much more sinister. In the Broken Sword behind him, the scene Sui saw was even more murderous. However, this aura was monstrous demonic aura that corroded everything. In an instant, this aura rushed into Suyi's body as if it wanted to destroy everything. It rushed into Su Yi's heaven-origin demonic soul, and even his heaven-origin demonic soul couldn't stop it. Boom! The mysterious space that was silent in Su Yi's mind moved. A blazing and boundless aura burst out and spread across his mind, destroying the monstrous demonic aura in an instant. The monstrous demonic aura seemed to be extremely fearful of the aura in the mysterious space. It rushed out in fear and immediately retreated like a tide. Boom! A huge shockwave hit Su Yi's body, and a terrifying aura swept out. Su Yi tried his best to resist, but he couldn't resist. Su Yi was shocked. The blood in his body surged, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His body was then sent flying and fell to the ground. Puff! Spitting out blood, Su Yi was seriously injured. The power contained in the divine weapon was too great, and Su Yi couldn't bear it. Yin Lingfeng's eyes were as red as blood. He seemed to have been affected by Su Yi's actions. Faint black spots flickered in his eyes. He looked at Su Yi, who was seriously injured, and a murderous aura filled his eyes. Chi! Yin Lingfeng acted, wielding the divine weapon in his hand. At this moment, his silhouette was as fast as lightning, instantly appearing before Su Yi as he stabbed out with his sword. You don't have the qualifications to fight for the divine weapon. Die, brat! Yin Lingfeng shouted coldly, his killing intent surging. With the divine weapon in his hand, he arrived in front of Su Yi. Su Yi's eyes were filled with shock. He was simply unable to dodge. Under the heavy injuries, he could only circulate all the yuan qi in his body and condense it in front of him as he rapidly retreated. Yin Lingfeng, what are you doing? In the distance, Sita Muyang shouted loudly. His figure quickly rushed out, wanting to help. Qila, it was too fast. The yuan qi light shield in front of Su Yi was like tofu in front of the divine weapon. It could not withstand a single blow and shattered inch by inch. Yin Lingfeng's eyes were filled with killing intent. Su Yi's eyes widened, and the aura on his body suddenly soared several times. The divine weapon was as red as blood. Its aura was monstrous, and it directly pierced into Su Yi's chest. Swish! The divine weapon was like lightning, piercing through Su Yi's chest. At this moment, Su Yi's diamond body could not block the divine weapon. PFFF, Su Yi spat out a mouthful of blood. A terrifying demonic aura once again surged into the divine weapon, wanting to destroy everything. In Su Yi's mind, the mysterious space once again erupted with brilliant light, spreading out and destroying the demonic aura that had rushed into Su Yi's body. Boss Su Yi! Situ Muyang exclaimed as his body was sent flying. The terrifying energy hurricane in front of him was not something he could get close to. Muyao, Sakura, Asaka, Gongqi, Ryugan River, and the others were all shocked. TSK, what are you going to use to fight with me? Die! Yin Lingfeng sneered loudly. He pulled out his sword and kicked Su Yi's body away. Bang bang! Su Yi's body smashed onto the square stone platform. Blood flowed out from his chest, forming a pool of blood. The divine weapon Scarlet Dragon belongs to me from now on. Yin Lingfeng no longer paid attention to Su Yi. In his heart, Su Yi was already a dead man. He brandished his sword and stood there. On the divine weapon, the scarlet light was like blood, and the light seemed to illuminate the entire divine sword valley. Buzz buzz! On the stone platform, the treasured swords hummed and clanged. Light filled the air, and sharp sword chi fluctuated, as if they were on a pilgrimage. Boom! The majestic mountain shook, and the surrounding space began to undergo a strange change. The distorted space was like a tight fried dough twist. A terrifying aura also spread out from the middle of the stone platform that Su Yi had smashed onto. A dazzling light shot out from the cracks in all directions. Rumble, cracks the size of an arm split open on the entire mountain. They grew bigger and bigger, and huge rocks rolled down. The aura became more and more terrifying. Buzz buzz! The treasured swords rumbled and began to fly out. They were filled with light and spiraled above the void. Not good. It seems like it's going to collapse. Gu Qinyu exclaimed. At this moment, the huge mountain was about to collapse. These treasured swords are all extraordinary. Those who are fated will obtain them. Xi Yuan said. At this moment, the treasured swords seemed to have moved, and his mind communicated with the treasured swords. Swish! A treasured sword was filled with light and pressure as it descended. Xi Yuan has obtained an opportunity. Everyone was moved. Xi Yuan had really obtained an opportunity. Although everyone's goal this time was to obtain supreme benefits left behind by the ancestor, the treasured swords had already been obtained. At this moment, the divine weapon had fallen into the hands of Yin Lingfeng. Everyone could only settle for the next best thing. If they could obtain other treasured swords, this trip would not have been in vain. Figures immediately communicated with the treasured swords, hoping to gain something. Buzz! The treasured swords hummed and flickered. There was indeed some movement. Many people's treasured swords burst out with bright light and landed in front of everyone. Boss Sui! Sita Muyang shouted loudly. The Imperial Wind battle armor on his body was activated, but he could not get close to the front. He was blasted away by the impact, and blood kept flowing out of his mouth. Mu Yao and Gong Qi's eyes were focused at this moment. They were quietly trying to get closer, but it was useless. When they saw someone communicating with the treasured swords and obtaining an opportunity, they secretly retreated. Rumble! The entire majestic mountain finally began to collapse completely. The earth shook and the mountain shook. Countless rays of light shot into the sky. Huge rocks rolled down, and the mountain poured down in all directions, drowning everything. The mountain collapsed from top to bottom, and countless huge rocks rolled down. It was as if 100,000 beasts were surging, and the sky was falling and the earth was cracking. The scene was extremely terrifying. Not good. Ryugan River, Gu Chunyu, and the others' expressions changed drastically. They used their remaining strength to form their vital chi and floated in midair. Boss Sui! Sita Muyang cried out in grief. The wings of the Imperial Wind battle armor on his back flapped, and he wanted to rush into the collapsed mountain to save Sui. Mu Yao, Sakura, Asaka, Gongqi, and Ryugan River appeared on their vital chi. They seemed to want to save Sui, but they could not get close. Ouyang Shuo also went forward. Ouyang moved closer. Sui had saved him before, so he didn't retreat. Chapter 581. Sita Muyang wanted to rush in, but he could only watch as Sui sank into the mountain and was buried under the huge rocks and dust. He cried out loudly, his eyes wet. Rumble! Inside the collapsed mountain, there was also a mighty aura that soared into the sky, pushing back Mu Yao, Gong Qi, and the others who wanted to approach. There's no other way. Let's retreat first. Jin 11 came to Sita Muyang's side, his pitch-black eyes looking at Sui, who was buried under the rolling rocks and dust. His expression was regretful, and he pulled Sita Muyang back. That terrifying aura soared into the sky, and if they were affected, it would be enough to sweep them in and bury them. None of them could resist. Yuan Qi took form under their feet and quickly left. They looked at the collapsed mountain with complicated expressions on their faces. Sui is buried. Qin Feng, Yushanha, and the other disciples were still in a daze. Such a terrifying guy. Ever since he came to the Divine Sword sect, he had been singing loudly and was incomparably ferocious. The shock of the Myriad Sword Assembly's peak showdown was still fresh in their minds, but now it had already been buried. A young monstrous genius died, just like that. Gong Qi and Mu Yao had complicated expressions in their eyes, and their eyes were covered with shadows. Yin Lingfeng soared into the sky. The giant wolf shadow under his feet was ferocious, and the divine weapon Crimson Dragon in his hand was shining brightly. Looking at the collapsed mountain below, swallowing the blue-robed figure, Yin Lingfeng sneered. So what if he ascended the ascending heaven platform? So what if he had the legendary heaven-rank talent? He would be able to shake the world in the future and look down on the common people. But he had to be able to live until that day. He was the one who could really soar into the sky and looked down on all the heroes. Now that the supreme benefits were in his hands, who could compete with him? Yin Lingfeng, you killed boss Su Yi. I'm not done with you. Sita Muyang bellowed. His eyes were red, his fists were clenched, and veins were bulging on his face. He looked ferocious as he glared at Yin Lingfeng. The wings of the Wind Rider battlesuit flapped as he charged toward Yin Lingfeng. Boom! Situ Muyang's hair was already disheveled as he soared into the sky. Black light surged violently as he punched out. Energy swept out, causing the surrounding space to tremble. Su Yi stole my divine weapon and was accidentally killed by me. You can't blame me for that. Yin Lingfeng said coldly as he threw out a punch with his left arm to meet the attack. The two fists collided and energy burst forth. Sita Muyang was forced back. Yin Lingfeng did not dare to be too heavy-handed. This was Situ Muyang, the son of the sect leader. He was afraid of him. Rumble! The majestic mountain collapsed as the entire divine Sword Valley rumbled endlessly. Light rays shot out from the distant sky, as if the heavens were collapsing and the earth was splitting. Go! Go quickly! We're going to be buried. With a hoarse voice, the mysterious mummy expert appeared once again. However, at this moment, there were several strange swords stabbed into his withered body. Everything was incomparably strange as he hurriedly said, Go, go. Let's leave this place first. Hurry. Ryugan River shouted. The entire Divine Sword Valley seemed to be changing, as if it was going to collapse and be buried. They had to leave as soon as possible. Let's go. Let's get out of here first. Jin Yi once again pulled Sita Muyang. Let's go. One figure after another left in panic, rushing towards the exit. The entire Divine Sword Valley had already undergone an earth-shattering commotion, and they could not stay for long. I can't suppress it anymore. I can't suppress it anymore. Looking at Ryugan River, Mu Yao, and the other figures leaving one after another, the mummy's hoarse voice kept repeating those words. Previous chapter, next chapter, boom. Outside the Divine Sword Valley, the aura soared into the sky. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled, as if it was the end of the world. One figure after another floated in the air, their eyes resplendent. Nothing will happen to them inside, right? What exactly happened inside? Some of the elders' faces became more and more serious. The commotion inside the Divine Sword Valley was getting louder and louder. A terrifying aura spread out through the Divine Sword Valley, causing them to feel apprehensive. I hope nothing bad happens. Some of the elders looked worried. The disciples who entered the Divine Sword Valley this time were all representatives of the younger generation of the Xinjiang Gate. Su Yi, Mu Yao, Yin Lingfeng, and the other disciples, all of them had abnormal talent. Not to mention what happened, even if any of them had an accident, it would be a huge loss for the Xinjiang Gate. I hope that we only obtained a supreme benefit and not an accident. Seeing the increasingly shocking commotion, all the old experts of the Xinjiang Gate became extremely nervous. Situ Liuyun's gaze was fixated on the exit. Such a terrifying commotion had already caused him to be worried. Someone seems to have come out. Suddenly, an elder exclaimed. A figure appeared at the exit, and someone came out. Everyone's gazes immediately gathered at the exit, and a formless aura locked onto the exit. Whoosh, whoosh. Very quickly, one figure after another appeared at the exit and quickly rushed out. Previous chapter, next chapter, boom. At this moment, an invisible aura suddenly distorted the space around the entire Divine Sword Valley. Light rays burst forth, forming an energy storm that enveloped the area. The distorted aura became denser and denser, and the sound of lightning and thunder became more and more intense, shaking one's eardrums. A terrifying aura spread out from within the Divine Sword Valley, causing the faces of the surrounding elders and experts to be filled with shock. The kind of aura caused their hearts to palpitate. Puff, puff. When this kind of aura rushed out from the exit, it also sent one figure after another flying out from the exit. One figure after another fell from the sky like a stone ball that was sent flying. They spat out blood and outlined a bloody light. Whoosh, whoosh. Some of the elders had already rushed out. Their faces changed drastically as they wrapped around the figures in midair. It's them. The figures that were sent flying were Ryugan River, Mu Yao, Gongqi, Oluo, and the other disciples. Looking at the disciples who were being attacked one after another, the old man from the Divine Sword sect was certain that something huge had definitely happened in the Divine Sword Valley. That's Green Abyss Flaming Sword, Great Desolate Ancient Sword, Dark Light Sword. Oh my god, is this the Phoenix Sun Sword? Thunder Dragon Sky Demon Sword. This must be the Thunder Dragon Sky Demon Sword. When the figures rushed out one after another, they all held onto the opportunities they had obtained from the Divine Sword Valley. When the elders and experts noticed them, their eyes trembled and their pupils constricted. These were all famous treasured swords from the Xinjiang Gate back then. They were once famous in the world, and the disciples that entered this time all seemed to have had their own opportunities. How is it? In the air, Elder by Mingshan used both of his hands to hold onto Yun Lingfeng with a gentle force. He immediately asked Yun Lingfeng with a nervous expression. Chapter 582. Uft. Yun Lingfeng spat out a mouthful of blood, but the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. His hand reached out, and a crimson-red sword appeared in his hand. Although the light had dimmed, it was still filled with a terrifying sword energy. Ancient runes and symbols lingered around it, causing anyone who looked at it to shudder in fear. This is Elder by Mingshan could not help but tremble, and his gaze was like lightning. Divine weapon Red Dragon, left behind by the ancestor. It is fated to be with me. Yun Lingfeng opened his mouth. His hair was disheveled, and his eyes revealed a smile. Ah! Elder by Mingshan laughed. His laughter was mixed with vitality, and it was deafening when it was mixed with the sound of thunder and lightning. Everyone's eyes suddenly looked over, and all of them immediately focused on Yun Lingfeng's hand. That blood-red sword made everyone's heart skip a beat. In an instant, everyone's eyes were filled with passion, and their hearts were surging. Vaguely, they seemed to know something. Divine weapon Red Dragon, left behind by the ancestor. It is fated to be with Ling Feng, and the Xinjiang Gate is fortunate. Elder by Mingshan laughed loudly. He was excited and happy, and his voice shook the clouds. Divine weapon Red Dragon, left behind by the ancestor. All the elders trembled in their hearts. Although they had already guessed it, they could not help but feel excited when they heard the confirmation. For so many years, the supreme benefits left behind by the ancestor had never been obtained by anyone. But today, the supreme benefits left behind by the ancestor had fallen into the hands of Yun Lingfeng. It was left behind by the Xinjiang Gate's ancestor. It was a supreme benefit, and everyone present knew what it meant. Everyone's eyes fell on Yun Lingfeng. In the future, this kid would be famous in the world. Supreme benefits left behind by the ancestor. Situ Liu Yun's eyes trembled. Yun Lingfeng smiled. Supreme benefits fell into his hands, and from now on, he would be unrivaled among the younger generation of the Xinjiang Gate. Soon, the entire middle region, and even the entire continent, would be under his control. Swoosh, swoosh. Suddenly, two figures charged out of the exit. Two whooshing sounds resounded. Then, two figures appeared beside the two figures. They grabbed the two of them and prevented them from falling to the ground. The two figures who attacked were Situ Lu Yun and an elder. The two people who were captured were Situ Muyang and Sword 11. Puchi, Situ Muyang's wind-riding battlesuit, was broken. He was vomiting blood. Situ Muyang's expression changed, and a pill was immediately stuffed into Situ Muyang's mouth. Father, Basu, he was killed by Yun Lingfeng on purpose. When he saw Situ Lu Yun, Situ Muyang immediately cried out loudly with tears in his eyes. In the battlefield of 10,000 swords, he had saved his life many times. Even in the Divine Sword Valley, he had always protected him. However, he could only watch as he was engulfed by the collapsed boulders and was helpless. He felt guilty and sorrowful. He was killed by Yun Lingfeng. Situ Miang's voice spread out and fell into the ears of the old powerhouses present. Suddenly, their expressions became complicated for no reason. Situ Liu Yun's gaze trembled violently, and violent ripples appeared. Head percent sea hair. Bai Mingshan looked at Yun Lingfeng, as if he wanted to confirm the answer. Yun Lingfeng sneered and signaled with his eyes. Humph. Elder Bai Mingshan snorted. So what if his disciple killed Su? Yun Lingfeng had obtained the ancestors' inheritance. He was no longer the same as before. Sui? One by one, the elders floated in the air and looked at Ryugan River, Qin Fong, and the other disciples who had just caught them. They wanted to know the answer. Ryugan River, Qin Fong, and the others nodded slightly. It was indeed Yun Lingfeng who killed Su Yi on purpose. Huff! After getting a definite answer, the sound of many people sucking in a cold breath filled the air. Su Yi was killed by Yun Lingfeng on purpose. With Su Yi's talent, this was a loss that the Shunjian Gate could not bear. However, everyone knew that Su Yi's death would cause a huge commotion in the Shunjian Gate. After all, Su Yi was no longer an outer disciple, but the disciple of that person. Yun Lingfeng, how dare you? Situ Liyun shouted loudly. His anger could not be suppressed. His voice shook the heavens. His bright eyes immediately stared at Yun Lingfeng's body, and a sharp aura enveloped him. Under this kind of aura, Yun Lingfeng's heart trembled, and his soul felt uneasy. Rumble! The earth shook, and the entire Divine Sword Valley distorted. The energy was finally unable to be suppressed, and completely exploded in the air. The mountains collapsed, and the earth cracked, as if it was the end of the world. The entire Divine Sword Valley exploded like a volcano. The energy storm was like a mushroom cloud that soared into the sky. The loud explosion caused everyone's ears to ring. Retreat quickly. Feeling that terrifying scene, the elders and experts of the Xinjiang Gate all revealed looks of shock. If they were to be affected, they would also be buried. One figure after another quickly retreated. The entire Divine Sword Valley was sinking and exploding everywhere. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Light soared into the sky and the earth shook. It was as if the mountains and seas were moving. After a long while, everything slowly calmed down. The dust that filled the sky fell, and their vision became clear again. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. The entire Divine Sword Valley had collapsed into the ground, and a large area seemed to have disappeared. In the distance, many disciples of the Shunjian Gate appeared. Such a huge commotion alarmed the entire Shunjian Gate. Looking at what was happening in the distance, the disciples of the Shunjian Gate sucked in a breath of cold air and broke out in cold sweat. They had no idea what was going on. The place in the distance was also a forbidden area, and ordinary disciples had no idea what kind of place it was. Divine Sword Valley has already sealed itself and buried itself. Disperse. There was an old voice that reverberated in the air, landing in the ears of many people. However, this voice only landed in the ears of many people. There were even more people who did not know and had never heard of it. It is said that that is the Divine Sword Valley, the place where the ancestors of our Shunjian Gate are buried. Senior brother Yun Lingfeng has obtained the ancestors' legacy. That is a supreme benefit. From now on, among those of the same generation, senior brother Yun Lingfeng will be the number one. Time slowly passed, and what happened in the Divine Sword Valley also spread throughout the Shunjian Gate. The commotion attracted everyone's attention, and it was impossible to hide it. Oh my God, that's the supreme benefit left behind by the ancestor. From now on, senior brother Yun Lingfeng will be able to move unhindered in the central region. Some disciples were extremely envious. Yun Lingfeng had obtained the ancestor's supreme benefit. That was a great opportunity. What a pity, Su Yi is actually dead. It is said that he has heaven-ranked talent. Some people were regretful that Su Yi, who had such monstrous talent, had actually died. It was a pity. Yun Lingfeng is too much. He must have been jealous of his defeat in the Myriad Sword Conference. He actually killed Su Yi. An outer sect disciple spoke out. Lower your voice. No one can afford to offend Yun Lingfeng now. Chapter 583. What's there to be afraid of? If Su Yi is still alive, even if Yun Lingfeng obtains some supreme benefits, he will still not be Su Yi's opponent. The number one person in the younger generation of Shunjian Gate will not be Yun Lingfeng's turn. Many bold outer sect disciples whispered. Although Su Yi was fierce, he had never bullied them. This made them feel indignant for Su Yi. When he was in the myriad sword battlefield, Su Yi had plundered all the inner sect disciples and many direct disciples, but he had never made a move on the outer sect disciples. The setting sun was filled with clouds and mist, and the setting sun was like blood. Hiss, hiss, in a quiet courtyard, a towering tree, a 9-hell snake flicked its tongue. Although that guy is a bit annoying, he's not going to die. I clearly don't like him, but why do I feel so uncomfortable in my heart? Mu Yao looked at the setting sun, her delicate red lips whispering at this moment, trying to attract people to kiss her, but her expression was solemn, and her eyebrows were knitted. The 9-hell snake leaned against Mu Yao, as if it could feel her mood, and intimately rubbed against her, as if it wanted to comfort Mu Yao. The void moved slightly, and a figure quietly appeared. It was a beautiful woman in her 50s, who looked extremely young. Her figure was exquisite, and her clothes were elegant and luxurious. Her black hair was gently tied into a flowing cloud bun. Swoosh, swoosh, seeing the beautiful woman coming, the 9-hell snake immediately revealed a look of reverence and lowered its head, not daring to raise it easily. Master, seeing the beautiful woman coming, Mu Yao immediately got up and ran over and asked the beautiful woman, "How is Master?" On the beautiful woman's face, a pair of bright and deep black eyes flashed with a hint of regret. She shook her head at Mu Yao and said softly, "Divine Sword Valley was personally arranged by the ancestor of Xinjiang Gate, and now it has completely collapsed and buried everything. No one can enter again. Master, could it be that he really—" Mu Yao's nose twitched for no reason, and her last hope was shattered. Even if he's still alive, he won't be able to come out again. The beautiful woman shook her head in regret. She said softly, "For a brat like that to die prematurely, it is truly regretful. If that bastard is still alive, I won't bother him anymore. I don't like him, but I don't want him to die." Mu Yao murmured, tears welling up in her eyes. "Old man, Su seems to like that kid a lot. If he knew, I'm afraid he wouldn't feel too good about it." The beautiful woman also seemed to be a little absent-minded at this moment. The afterglow of the setting sun filled the void. Most, New Chapter 9. Super P. Gong Chi's eyes were absent-minded as he recalled that smiling face in his mind. "Do you like me and want to marry me? But even if you do, I really don't have any mystical spiritual fruits for you." These words echoed in Gong Chi's mind. That scene was still vivid in her mind and could not be erased. Why would I think of him? I clearly hate him so much. Gong Chi muttered to himself, his eyes beautiful. The overlapping mountain ranges were magnificent and magnificent. This was a sacred place that stretched for tens of thousands of miles. Between the ink-blue mountain peaks, there was a mist rising. The peak of the Green Mountain was like an ink painting of mountains and rivers, like a fairyland. Whoosh! On the peak of the mountain, a graceful figure in a fiery red dress bathed in the sunset glow. In each of her hands was a curved saber. Rays of saber light swept out as her wrist rotated the saber hilt. The saber in her hands hummed and shone brightly. The two curved sabers were moving as they slowly rotated faster and faster. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Rays of saber light swept out like crescent moons and became faster and faster. The gravel and leaves on the ground were also swept up as if they were condensed into a hurricane. The saber light broke through the air and spun. The figure in a fiery red dress was as light as a swallow. The two sabers flashed as fast as lightning. The crescent saber light flashed and merged with the figure in a fiery red dress. The crimson saber light and the figure in a fiery red dress formed a sea of fire on the peak of the mountain. The woman's soft and boneless waist danced with the two sabers. She was like a fairy surrounded by the bright crescent saber light. After a long time, The crescent saber light disappeared. The figure in a fiery red dress stood. The two curved sabers were outlined in front of her, as if forming an arc. It added valiance to the graceful figure. This graceful figure was a girl of 16 or 17 years old. Her skin was whiter than snow, and she was incomparably delicate and beautiful. Looking at the blood-red sunset and the girl's beautiful face, there was a kind of silence for a long time. Junior sister Ruashi's strength is getting more and more terrifying. A voice sounded, and a girl of about 16 or 17 years old appeared on the mountain. Senior sister Li Ling, the woman in a fiery red dress, looked back and smiled slightly. She was not surprised, as if she had already known that someone would come. I just came out of seclusion not long ago, so I came to see you on the way. The girl's lips were like cherry blossoms, and her eyebrows were like ink paintings. She was about the same age as the woman in a fiery red dress, only slightly older. Her slender and beautiful legs, towering chest, and slim waist together outlined a moving arc. It was enough to make any man unable to help but take a few more glances. If Su-Yi was here, he would definitely be able to recognize that this girl was Li Ling from the Saint Mountain. He had been to the barbarian city before, and he had interacted with her before. It seems that senior sister Li Ling has improved a lot. The girl in red smiled. Her eyes were bright and clear, shining like the stars in the sky. Under her red dress, her curves were exquisite, and her figure was curvaceous. Her red dress was like fire, and her temperament was like a lone plum in winter. She had a graceful and arrogant air about her. This was a kind of beauty that was different from Li Ling's. Li Ling's beauty was enough to make any man unable to help but take a few more glances. However, the girl in a fiery red dress beauty was somewhat opposite. She was so beautiful that no man dared to approach her. She was so beautiful that even women would be jealous of her. No matter how much I've improved, I can't compare to you. You're too scary. Li Ling smiled and looked at the girl in a fiery red dress, as if she wanted to say something. Senior sister, are you here for something? The girl in a fiery red dress sensed it and smiled. Her eyes were curved like crescent moons, and her charm seemed to be overflowing. Between her frown and smile, her temperament was like a tulip, noble and elegant. Under the sunset, the girl in a fiery red dress seemed to be shrouded in a thin layer of red mist. It seemed real and illusory at the same time. She was like a flower that had just bloomed, bright and beautiful. I just came out of seclusion and received a piece of news. I'm not sure if I should tell you. Li Ling hesitated and smiled faintly. Her temperament was the opposite of the girl in a fiery red dress, but she was equally charming. If she had 2 more years, she would probably be unparalleled in this world. Chapter 584. I heard that a young man named Su-Yi suddenly appeared in the recent Myriad Sword Conference at Xinjiang Gate and won first place. He's quite young. As Li Ling spoke, she looked at the red-clothed girl. She had just come out of seclusion and inadvertently learned of this news. She still remembered that special youth in Barbarian City and knew that there was an invisible relationship between that youth and this junior apprentice sister. Su-Yi. When these 2 words fell into her ears, the red-clothed young girl's beautiful face that was shining brilliantly was instantly fiercely moved. It seems that junior sister still remembers that young man. Li Ling asked without showing any trace of emotion. Of course I remember. The girl in red pretended to be calm, but her heart was pounding. She looked at Li Ling and suddenly asked, Senior sister, are you sure it's that Su-Yi? I don't know. Li Ling shook her head and looked at the girl in red. She smiled and joked, but Su-Yi really miraculously didn't die. He must be that person in Xinjiang Gate. Something must have happened to him. To be able to become the champion of the Myriad Sword Conference at Xinjiang Gate, his relationship with junior sister is at least a little closer. I have nothing to do with him. He's just a pervert. The girl in red pouted her red lips and pretended to be disdainful. Is that so? Li Ling said softly. Maybe they have the same name. After all, Su-Yi is already dead. There aren't so many miracles in the world. Senior sister, can you help me keep an eye on Su Yi and see if he's Mansheng? The red-clothed girl looked at Li Ling, her beautiful eyes shining brightly. It doesn't matter whether he is or not. Anyway, Junior's sister doesn't care. Li Ling smiled and pretended to be joking. If he's really still alive, then it's because God has eyes. That pervert, I will definitely kill him with my own hands. The red-clothed girl clenched her teeth and pretended to be angry. However, her eyes were filled with light. She had bright eyes and white teeth. Her slender waist, tall figure, and straight and slender legs outlined a perfect and moving arc. Night fell. Xinjian Gate, 36 Sword Peak, Back Mountain. In the valley, Situ Muyang, Su Jiahui, Zhang Qing, Lu Ji, Wang Fan, and a dozen others were there. There was a lonely grave with a blank tombstone and a few cups of white wine. Su Yi boss, once we have the chance, we will avenge you. Situ Muyang, Zhang Qing, Wang Fan, Lu Ji, and others had tears in their eyes. Brother Su Yi. Su Jiahui's beautiful eyes were moist, and she was so sad that her body trembled. Someone wants to protect Yun Lingfeng. I'm not strong enough to avenge you. But boss Su Yi, I'll definitely think of a way to avenge you, said Situ Muyang. His eyes were filled with determination. The mysterious space was dark, but a faint fluorescent light was emitted from somewhere, preventing the space from turning pitch black. No one could see that Su Yi was lying on the cracked stone platform. The ancient stone platform had lost its light. Blood was flowing, and his body was in a terrible state, especially Su Yi's chest. There was a 3-finger-wide sword hole through his back. His flesh was badly mangled, and his bones were exposed. It was a horrifying sight. Su Yi was completely unconscious. There was no aura on his body. It was as if he was really dead. He was completely unconscious, as if he was really dead. Su Yi's Origin Supreme art did not disappear. His body was covered in blood, and his wounds were drying up. However, there was no sign of recovery. First, Su Yi's chest had been pierced. His heart had been shattered. Even if there were experts here, they would shake their heads. His heart had been pierced. It was difficult to heal such a serious injury. It was impossible for a miracle to happen. In the dark space, there was a deathly silence. Time had lost its meaning. 1 day, 2 days, 1 year, 10 years. There was no difference in this dark and deathly silent space. No one could see that in Su Yi's mind, the mysterious space was constantly emitting a faint light. It shone in his mind, causing the heavenly Yuan demonic soul to fluctuate in scarlet light. His soul was undying. No one knew how much time had passed. Su Yi's shattered heart was quietly covered by a layer of sunlight-like light. Immediately after, a peculiar radiance emanated from Su Yi's bones, muscles, meridians, and acupoints from the inside out. The light was rather dim at first. However, as time passed, it became more and more dazzling. It was accompanied by a strange aura that reverberated in this strange space. Su Yi was drenched in blood, and his body that was riddled with wounds was slowly recovering at this moment. This recovery did not come from the diamond body. The speed of recovery did not seem to be as fast as the diamond body. However, at this moment, Su Yi's body was recovering. It was accompanied by a mysterious aura. It was as if something was awakening and awakening from a deep sleep. In the end, the light from Su Yi's body spread from inside to outside. It wrapped his entire body. It became more and more dazzling. The light shone on this mysterious space like a cocoon of light. Xinjian Gate, Sky's Sword Peak. Now that I think about it, I've let that kid down. In the study, Situ Luyun stood with his hands behind his back. There was a hint of regret on his face. Sect leader, you don't have to blame yourself. This has nothing to do with you. The Right Protector looked at Situ Luyun. His expression was solemn. He said regretfully, the heavens are jealous of talents. Perhaps that kid's talent is too good. This is his fate. He is destined to be unable to reach the heavens. This is not the jealousy of the heavens. It is Yun Lingfeng who purposely killed him. He destroyed the future of my Xinjian Gate. Situ Luyun clenched his fists tightly behind his back. His gaze surged. He understood the specific situation and said, "If I had insisted on only letting Su-Yi enter the Divine Sword Valley, perhaps all of this would not have happened. The supreme benefits left behind by the ancestor would have also fallen into the hands of Su-Yi. But now that the ancestor has left it in the hands of Yunling Feng, and Su-Yi has also died, many of the elders in the sect have paid attention to Yunling Feng." The Right Protector sighed. He knew what sect leader Sido Luyun was thinking. He valued Su-Yi more. But now everything had changed. Yunling Feng had killed Su-Yi, and it was difficult for him to be severely punished. Everything was because the ancestor had left it on Yunling Feng. He was the future of Shunjian Gate, and was protected by many elders in Shunjian Gate. Has Elder Su come out of seclusion? After a moment of silence, Situ Luyun asked the Right Protector with a frown. "Not yet. I have already arranged for disciples to keep an eye on him. Once Elder Su comes out of seclusion, they will immediately report to me." Hearing that, the Right Protector's expression became serious. He hesitated for a moment, and with a trace of expectation, he asked Sido Luyun, "This Su-Yi is actually not Elder Su's direct disciple. He did not truly acknowledge him as his master. Maybe Elder Su will not." The Right Protector wanted to say something, but hesitated. "I hope so," Sido Luyun sighed. After a moment of silence, he said, "Make arrangements for those disciples. You must not let Elder Su know about it, especially Mu Yang, Su Jiahui, and Zhang Qing. You must pay attention to them." The Right Protector nodded. He knew what Sido Luyun was afraid of. Chapter 585. In this mysterious space, time was completely meaningless. A dazzling cocoon of light lay on the cracked ancient stone platform, illuminating this space. No one could see that Su-Yi's body was wrapped in this cocoon of light. In Su-Yi's chest, the shattered heart was shrouded in a layer of sunlight-like brilliance. His bones, muscles, meridians, and acupoints were all emitting a strange radiance. The radiance became more and more dazzling, accompanied by a strange aura that reverberated. Su-Yi's bloody body was also slowly recovering. It seemed that not long after, the wounds on his body had already disappeared. Only the sword wound on his chest that had pierced through his heart was still deep enough to see the bone. "I knew I shouldn't have been involved with a human. Fortunately, I've already awakened, otherwise I would have been killed by you. I still have to save your life." Suddenly, in this void where time was meaningless, such a faint voice suddenly filled the air. At the same time, there seemed to be an invisible force fluctuating. A strange scene appeared. On Su-Yi's pierced heart, the mysterious sunlight-like brilliance and aura became more and more dazzling, as if it carried a kind of vitality, constantly surging into the heart. From Su-Yi's bones, muscles, meridians, and acupoints, the radiance that permeated from inside to outside seemed to be drawn by some kind of force, constantly converging. Finally, in a strange flow, it endlessly surged into Su-Yi's heart. A strange scene appeared. Su-Yi's heart, which had stopped beating, suddenly began to beat. Boom! It was also at this moment that in Su-Yi's mind, the light that filled the mysterious space suddenly intensified. The light was incomparably dazzling, accompanied by an incomparably scorching aura that spread directly to Su-Yi's entire body. Under this terrifying, scorching aura, Su-Yi did not know whether he was dead or alive, and all the hair on his body stood on end. A terrifying heat filled his entire body, as if to burn his meridians and blood vessels. In a daze, Su-Yi seemed to be immersed in a strange dream. He felt as if he was about to be instantly burned and withered by a terrifying heat. Oh, Guji! No one knew where it came from, but the shocking roar of a beast was like a thunderclap from the ninth heaven. It was deafening, and an ancient land gradually appeared in the surroundings. It was a vast and boundless heaven and earth. Surging flames spread in all directions, and the scarlet light illuminated the ninth heaven. Dazzling flames filled the sky like interweaving divine chains that connected the heavens and the earth. Awoo! In the sky, the incomparably huge demonic beast was entrenched like a huge mountain. Its terrifying aura was surging, and it was surrounded by a halo of light. There were also huge, ferocious birds that spread their wings and covered the sky. When one stood in front of them, they were like ants in front of the sky. They were incomparably tiny. There was a huge tiger that was coiled up. Its entire body was shining with white light, and it was about to pounce as it roared like thunder. A giant bird spread its wings and covered the sky. Its ferocious eyes were like two seas of fire that could burn everything. There was a giant tortoise standing in the void. The tortoise and the serpent intertwined. Inky black light overflowed into the sky. Divine light constantly rose behind it, as if it was suppressing the world. There was a giant dragon coiling about, multicolored light shining in all directions, able to tear apart heaven and earth. There was a gigantic figure that towered thousands of feet, occupying this world like a deity. Strange phenomena constantly appeared in the surroundings. The river of stars fell, the universe was in turmoil, the heavens collapsed, and the earth cracked. A huge shadow stood between the heavens and the earth. The stars revolved in its palm, and the sun behind it created 1,000 layers of stormy waves. Wind and thunder resounded, accompanied by the endless rumbling of the heavens, sonorous and ear-splitting. How shocking was all of this? It was like a Buddha. All of this was familiar yet strange, as if déjà vu. Under the vast and terrifying aura, Su-yi, who had just woken up, immediately fainted. Where did this kid come from? Why does he have such an aura? The faint voice became horrified, as if it had seen the most unbelievable thing. Whoosh! From Su-yi's body, the radiance spread from the inside to the outside, enveloping his entire body. It became more and more dazzling, and the cocoon of light formed around his body became more and more resplendent. At this moment, if someone was by Su-yi's side, they would definitely be able to discover that on the sword wound on Su-yi's chest that was difficult to heal, a wisp of scarlet light gathered. It was like gossamer, growing in number and becoming more and more dazzling. In the end, it crawled into Su-yi's shattered heart and drilled into it. When the scarlet light surged into his heart, not only did the wound on Su-yi's heart not heal, it even began to corrode and melt bit by bit. It kept cracking and shattering, as if it was about to be completely destroyed. The light of life that had originally covered Su-yi's heart seemed to be unable to stop the destruction of the scarlet light at all. The speed at which Su-yi's heart cracked and shattered was not fast, but continued, showing signs of completely shattering. However, the strange thing was that Su-yi's gradually shattering heart did not disperse into a bloody mist, but condensed together. The scarlet light seemed to carry a strange energy that connected Su-yi's shattered heart together. It shattered but did not disperse, cracked but did not separate. Gradually, Su-yi's entire heart seemed to have turned into a ball of scarlet fire within the scarlet light. The high temperature spread and spread throughout his body as if it wanted to burn everything. His entire body was burned to ashes. Cool J. Craftsman's Net Elyong free for a long time. Little why, in a daze as if he was in a dream, Su-yi's hazy consciousness woke up. He could not help but scream in the depths of his soul. The heart-burning pain caused his soul to twitch. In an instant, Su-yi quivered. Although he did not have the strength to open his eyes, his soul was completely awake. He could feel everything in his chest, as if his entire heart had turned into a sea of fire. The pain was unbearable. It was heart-burning. Su-yi felt that his heart seemed to have turned into ashes, but it still existed. It was as if his heart had been dug out. The pain was heart-wrenching and indescribable. It was definitely the most terrifying ordeal in the world. Only a freak like Su-yi, who had experienced all kinds of extreme tests and undergone all kinds of inhuman tempering, could still hold on at this moment. If it was an ordinary person, they would have died long ago. Sizzle. In Su-yi's chest, there was even a sizzling smoke. His entire heart was completely wrapped in scarlet light, and began to fill the air with flames. If this were to continue, Su Yi's entire heart might really turn into ashes and be completely incinerated. However, in this terrible situation, Su Yi also felt the aura of the Origin Supreme technique faintly spreading in his body. The familiar yet strange scene from not long ago still remained in his heart. Origin Demon Body, Diamond Body, Heavenly Origin Demon Soul. Could it be? Suddenly Su Yi's soul shook as if he had thought of something. Chapter 586. Huff. On the mountain peak, a skinny figure appeared and stretched lazily. It was an old face, but his body was like that of an 8- or 9-year-old child. He seemed to be in his 60s or 70s, and the faint wrinkles on his face were like traces left by time. This was Elder Su. His face was well-defined, and it could be vaguely seen that when he was young, he must have been quite handsome. In the Xinjiang Gate, some disciples had privately discussed that a long time ago, Elder Su was also a handsome and peerless young man. But later, something seemed to have happened. Elder Su's figure changed greatly, and his character became extremely unsociable. He was already kind to the people of the Xinjiang Gate. It was rumored that outside, someone just looked at Elder Su, and Elder Su destroyed his entire sect, razing it to the ground and turning it into ashes. There was an expert from a powerful sect who had once mocked Elder Su's appearance in private. When Elder Su found out about it, he chased after him for thousands of miles. Not only that, it was rumored that Elder Su had skinned this person and cut off his bones. His ruthlessness was enough to make one's hair stand on end. Later, this sect was indignant and wanted to seek justice, but Elder Su directly guarded the sect for 3 months and killed every disciple who came out. Elder Su had done many of these things, so Elder Su was also known as the Sword Yamasuruga in the outside world. Bathing in the morning sun, Elder Su's robe was very fitting, and the light white hair in his black hair added a bit of temperament. Then, without seeing how his figure moved, he disappeared in an instant. Early in the morning, on the 36th Sword Peak, many young disciples were busy with chores. For outer disciples, they had to finish a certain amount of chores every day before they had time to cultivate. Elder Su's figure appeared in the void. He intended to cross over, but his figure suddenly stopped and then landed. "Who asked you to come?" Looking at the 20 figures in front of him, Elder Su frowned slightly. His gaze moved slightly, calm and deep. The sudden voice caused the group of disciples to panic. When they saw the figure that had suddenly appeared, they immediately bowed. "Greetings, Elder Su. The sect sent us to the 36th Sword Peak to learn." Some of the disciples' expressions changed. They seemed to be suppressing the panic in their hearts, and they pretended to be calm as they replied to Elder Su. "We're Lu Ji, Wang Fan, and the others." Elder Su's eyes were as tranquil as an ancient well. "Call them over." Elder Su, Lu Ji, Wang Fan, and a few other outer disciples have already gone to the Holy Sword Cliff to cultivate in seclusion, a young man who seemed to be the leader replied. "All of them are in seclusion?" Elder Su asked. "Yes, they are all in seclusion." That young man's heart trembled for no reason. Elder Su's gaze landed on him, as though he wanted to see through him. That gaze was like a sword, wanting to pierce through him. Bang! Before that young man's voice had completely faded, a muffled sound was emitted from his body. His body fell to the ground, and blood spurted out from the corner of his mouth. "You're not outer sect disciples at all. You're all inner sect disciples, but you're pretending to be outer sect disciples. You better tell me honestly, where are Lu Ji, Wang Fan, and the others? Who sent you here? Don't you know the rules of the 36th Sword Peak?" With Elder Su's eyesight, none of this could escape his eyes. Initially, he was a little surprised that his 36th Sword Peak was filled with unfamiliar figures. Looking at these young men, he realized that none of them were outer sect disciples. Judging from their words, they did not seem to be outer sect disciples. However, they were pretending to be inner sect disciples. This was definitely not normal. Elder Su's spiritual strength swept across the surroundings. He frowned slightly. He did not see a single familiar disciple on the 36 Sword Peak. Something must have happened. On the latest chapter, Zeepy Festival. Elder Sue, please forgive us. This has nothing to do with us. The group of disciples suddenly trembled. They were so frightened that they immediately knelt on the ground, trembling. Hurry up and tell me what's going on. Otherwise, don't blame me for taking your lives. Elder Sue shouted in a deep voice. It seemed that something had indeed happened. Elder Sue, it was the sect master who sent us here. Lu Ji, Wang Fan, and the others were also taken away by the sect master. A disciple said in fear. Although he was afraid of the sect master, he was even more afraid of Elder Sue in this situation. What exactly happened? Tell me clearly, or I'll kill you. Elder Sue cried out in a deep voice. His short and small body had an aura that seemed to reach the clouds at this moment. His expression changed, and a sharp glint surged out from his eyes. All of this was arranged by the sect leader. From the looks of it, something big must have happened. However, he had not been in a retreat for long, and was actually unaware of everything. Elder Sue, the sect master, did not want the news of Su Yi's death to be known to Elder Sue. He was afraid that Elder Sue would be too sad. A disciple said in a trembling voice. They knew that the sect master had specially arranged for them to come here from the sky Sword Peak. He wanted to hide it from Elder Sue for a period of time. Who would have thought that they could not hide it in front of Elder Sue? What? Sue? Elder Sue's face changed in an instant. His whole body trembled, and his feet trembled slightly. Immediately, Elder Sue calmed down. He suppressed the fluctuation in his heart and asked, Sue, he died. How did he die? Well, these disciples wanted to say something but stopped. They looked at each other. At this moment, under Elder Sue's power, they had planned to lie according to the plan. However, at this moment, they were so shocked that their hearts trembled. It's the truth. How did Sui die? Elder Sue shouted. He felt more and more that things were not normal. If Suyi's death was not strange, there was no need for such an arrangement. It seemed that the whole Shunjian Gate did not want him to know and wanted to hide it from him. Well, these disciples were trembling. The sect master had specially instructed them not to tell Elder Sue how Sui died. Bang! A palm print suddenly appeared on the chest of a submissive disciple. With a low muffled sound, the disciple's body directly flew out and vomited blood. He landed in the distance. No one knew whether he was dead or alive. You even dare to lie to me. If you don't say it, this will be your end. Elder Sue shouted. His robes fluttered in the wind. He was already angry. Elder Sue, please forgive us. Sue, he was in the Divine Sword Valley. He was ambushed and killed by Yunling Feng on the 15th Sword Peak. These disciples' faces changed greatly. They did not dare to hide it. Immediately after, these disciples reported the general situation to Elder Sue in fear and trepidation. After knowing everything, Elder Sue's short body had a faint fluctuation of aura. However, he calmed down and asked, Where is Yunling Feng now? Has he been punished? Well, Chapter 587. Is that so? He was not punished for deliberately killing a fellow disciple? Elder Sue looked very calm, and his eyes were as calm as an ancient well. There was no fluctuation in his aura at all. But for some reason, when they felt that Elder Sue was completely calm at this moment, the fear in the hearts of the disciples became more intense. I heard several disciples wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Under the suppression of this invisible aura, it was difficult for them to not tell the truth. They were suppressed to the point that their hearts trembled. What did you hear? Elder Sue asked calmly. I heard that senior brother Yunling Feng got a lot of benefits and will be the future of Xinjiang Gate in the future. So I'm afraid that he won't be punished. A disciple lowered his voice and trembled violently. Yunling Feng is the future of Xinjiang Gate, and Sue, he should die. Is that so? Elder Sue sighed softly and then said to the disciples, You can all go now. Tell the person who sent you here to send back as many people as there were originally on the 36th Sword Peak. As for the other things, Suruga, will seek justice. Chi. When the last word fell, Elder Su's short figure had disappeared into thin air. Elder Su is back. I'm afraid that something big is going to happen. Go and inform the right guardian. The group of disciples came to their senses after a while. They were still in fear and immediately left to report to the right guardian. They were afraid that something big was going to happen in Xinjiang Gate. The 15th Sword Peak, towering into the clouds, was rich in the energy of heaven and earth. There were exotic flowers and herbs everywhere, as well as rare spiritual birds and beasts. The misty clouds made it look like a fairyland. Elder Su's figure appeared on the 15th Sword Peak out of thin air. Elder Su. On the 15th Sword Peak, someone raised his head and looked at the short figure that appeared directly in the void. Suddenly, his expression changed greatly. These disciples of the 15th Sword Peak did not have a good time during this period. Almost all the personal disciples and inner core disciples of the 15th Sword Peak have been trampled by Su Yi and have become the laughingstock of the entire Xinjiang Gate. The disciples of the 15th Sword Peak had hoped that the Myriad Sword Conference would be able to wash away their shame. However, Yin Lingfeng's defeat did not allow them to do as they wished. But now, Yin Lingfeng had obtained countless benefits from the Divine Sword Valley and had become a number one person among his peers in the Xinjiang Gate. He was the future of the Xinjiang Gate. This caused the disciples of the 15 Sword Peaks to be like rainbows after the rain. They were finally able to see the bright moon after the clouds and mist were parted. They exhaled and raised their eyebrows, and their faces were basked in the light. In addition to the loss of Su Yi, the disciples of the 15th Sword Peak also heaved a sigh of relief. At least in the future, no one would be able to trample on them. However, the appearance of Elder Su at this moment made these disciples instinctively shudder with fear. Now, in the entire Xinjiang Gate, everyone knew how Su Yi died. Although the gate had sealed off the news, how could it be sealed off when so many people had seen it with their own eyes? On the surface, no one mentioned Su Yi's death, but in private, all the disciples of the Xinjiang Gate knew that Su Yi was deliberately killed by Yun Lingfeng in the Divine Sword Valley. How could the disciples of the 15th Sword Peak not know why Elder Su had come here? Su Yi was from the 36th Sword Peak, so Elder Su coming to the 15th Sword Peak was definitely not a good thing. Elder Su descended from the sky with a calm expression. "Greetings, Elder Su." Some of the inner disciples trembled, and for some reason, their legs went soft. "Do you know where Yun Lingfeng is?" Elder Su's gaze swept across the surroundings. His mind had already scanned the surroundings, but he still could not find the person he was looking for. "We don't know." When the disciples of the 15th Sword Peak heard this, they almost collapsed to the ground. When it came to Yun Lingfeng, they were not fools. They already knew why Elder Su had come here. "Then I'll look for it myself," Elder Su said softly and stepped forward. "Elder Su, this is the 15th Sword Peak. Let's report to Master and ask Elder Su not to barge in recklessly." A direct disciple stood out, summoned his courage, and said while gritting his teeth, Suruga walked around the Xinjiang Gate, and it actually became a mess. It seems that the Xinjiang Gate has changed too much recently." Elder Su smiled faintly, and there was a hint of mockery in his eyes. Then his eyes turned cold, and he looked at the disciples of the 15th Sword Peak in front of him and said, "This has nothing to do with you, and you are not qualified to interfere. Back off, I won't say this again." "Elder Su, you are a dignified Elder Su. Why do you have to make things difficult for us, the younger disciples?" "I'll go and inform Master. Please wait." A direct disciple who seemed to be the leader gritted his teeth. Facing Elder Su, he was invisibly trembling in his heart. At this moment, he wished he was not here. Puff! Before he could finish his words, the disciple's pupils suddenly shrank. A short figure appeared in front of him without warning, and then he spat out a mouthful of blood, and his body flew out directly. The disciple's body slammed heavily on a rock more than 10 feet away, and he was bleeding and dying. "You are disrespectful to an elder. Your cultivation will be destroyed, and you will leave the Xinjiang Gate in the future." Elder Su's voice fell, and his eyes were filled with coldness. Cuckoo! The surrounding disciples immediately retreated in fear, and their hair stood on end. Elder Su, you came at the 15-sword peak and hit a junior so hard. Aren't you afraid of losing your dignity? Finally, a voice came from the 15th sword peak. Then, several figures appeared in the void of the 15th sword peak with the sound of wind breaking. There were 9 people in total. 9 figures appeared in the void, and as soon as they appeared, they faced the Suruga elder in a kind of half-encirclement. The 7 old men all had aged faces. One was an old woman, and the other was a middle-aged man. There were 9 people in total. 9 invisible auras filled the air, and the air on the 15-sword peak suddenly seemed to have solidified, making it difficult for people to breathe. Among the 9 people, the figure in the middle was Elder by Mingshan. He looked at the Suruga elder with a gloomy look in his eyes. I'm afraid something big is going to happen. The surrounding disciples all had good eyesight, and under the pressure of the invisible aura, they immediately retreated. With such a situation, it seems that I don't need to investigate anymore. Everything I know should be the truth. The Suruga elder looked up slightly and swept his gaze across the 9 figures in the void. Finally, his gaze fell on by Mingshan and said, I'm here to take Yun Lingfeng to the torture chamber. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.